Chapter 121 Legendary Beatdown. Cell was getting ravaged. The sheer pain of this was making him wish he had pain resistance genes. Crack. Another horrible crack was heard. That was Cell's skull, cracked from the back. Cell's subsequent screams of pain was proving his sheer terror as well. What was this? He can't hit Raditz at all, and Raditz is continuously hitting him. He was a walking sandbag? What the hell was this? Gah! Spitting blood from a kick to his sternum, Cell was chased mercilessly by Raditz. Boom. Shit. He isn't giving a single second for me to breathe. I will die like this. I can't go on. Bang. A sudden knee to his spine almost shattered Cell's wings. His eyes bulged out of his sockets, bloodshot to the extreme. Cell's mind was starting to fail him. Raditz's attack was relentless. He was using Ultra Instinct and was a complete machine when fighting. Cell had a zero chance of success in fighting back, unless he either learns Ultra Instinct or he massively overpowers Raditz. But he was incapable of doing them both. He had tried but failed spectacularly. So what the hell is he going to do? This was a dead end. Damn it. Cell's situation was also felt by the Z fighters down below, and most of them breathed a sigh of relief, almost all of them except Goku and Piccolo. Son, Raditz won't last long, Piccolo said while dodging the Cell Jr.'s attack. Goku, who was colliding fists with another one, nodded to Piccolo without looking back. Yay, he is flashing in and out of that state, but he will finish him before that? Goku had sensed how Raditz's hair would flash white to black at different intervals. It was inconsistent at best, proving a lack of skill in the form Raditz was using. But then again, this was a strong form. Cell wouldn't last long enough for Raditz to snap out of it. Boom. Turning towards the Cell Jr., Tien, Yamcha, and Titsu were fighting. Goku saw that they seemed to be in trouble. But before he could help, the Cell Jr. attacking him started to fight back crazily. Goku had to once again pay attention to his fight. Bang. Titsu was hit with a direct attack from the Cell Jr. He was in charge of maintaining the field and was thus targeted by the enemy, and finally managed to slip up once, resulting in getting hit directly. Thud. Falling into the ground, his body created a crater from the sheer force behind the attack. Titsu, are you okay? Tien asked in a concerned voice. They were individually much weaker than their enemy, so they had to make sure none of them got hit head-on, but Titsu messed up and finally got caught. I am fine. Titsu's weak voice sounded from the crater. He had stopped the attack in the nick of time by concentrating the entirety of his telekinetic powers in one spot. This helped him tank the power behind the Cell Jr.'s punch. Tien and Yamcha breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that Titsu was fine, and then again focused on the enemy before them. The Cell Juniors were learning their tricks as time progressed, so it was getting increasingly tougher to beat them. But they still had hope. Piccolo, Goku, Gohan, Nappa and Krillin were all either stronger than the Cell Juniors or straight up equal to them, so although it's taking a while to finish them off, they will still win. Whoom. Nappa's mouth cannon rushed towards the Cell Junior's head, managing to take him off guard and vaporizing the upper part of his body. Wiggle. But the lower half of the Cell Jr. kept jumping up and down, trying to run away from Nappa. Where do you think you are going? Nappa smirked. He had experience fighting all kinds of strange species. This wasn't the first time he saw a species survive without its top half either. So in a place like this, where Gohan, Goten or Trunks would hesitate or get creeped out, Nappa took the opportunity and rushed forward, grabbing the lower half of the Cell Jr. in his hands. Ha ha ha, I got you? And just like that, the first person emerged amongst the fighters who finished his fight. With Nappa almost being done with his battle, Goku speeded up as well. He wasn't taking this too seriously anymore with Raditz around. After fighting against the Cell Jr. for a bit, he had his share of fun, but now that it was time, he decided to end this as well. Swish. Appearing before the Cell Jr. with instant transmission, Super Saiyan 2 Goku pointed his palm at his opponent's head, and unleashed a concentrated blue ki blast. Whoom. Decimating his opponent down to the cellular level, complete annihilation. Piccolo also was about to finish his battle. A special beam cannon had already penetrated his opponent, and now Piccolo was throwing him up to destroy him with a ki blast. Gohan. But he also had enough energy to pay attention to Gohan, and what he saw made him happy. Gohan wasn't showing mercy anymore, and had already evaporated his opponent. What Piccolo didn't know was that seeing Cell Jr. again reminded Gohan of Videl and Aunt Miguel's death. This was more than enough for him to let loose and go for the kill. Now that majority of the Z fighters had finished their opponents off, only the Cell Jr. fighting the humans remained. Krillin soon surprised his opponent with a Destructo Disc and Kamehameha'd him to dust, but Tien Trio still weren't able to take down their foe. Huff huff, Yamcha, can keep him busy for a while. Tien yelled while panting. Yamcha trembled lightly but went for Cell Jr. anyway. He. The Cell Jr. laughed cruelly and began playing with Yamcha, but the attacks that were like game to him were deadly to Yamcha. If this goes on, forget keeping him busy, Yamcha would die instantly. Stagger. But the Cell Jr. staggered out of nowhere. Yamcha gasped, and then smiled because he understood this was Titsu supporting him from the side. And true to his feelings, Titsu, who had fallen down, was somehow picking himself off and trying hard to control the Cell Jr. Seeing the fight was still ongoing and the trio weren't in any immediate danger, the Z fighters decided to stay back and let the group finish their own battle. You, ugly, take this. And they didn't disappoint. Yamcha rushed towards the Cell Jr. and tackled him into a chokehold. Yee. The Cell Jr. struggled against Chitsu's telekinesis, but he was too strong for Chitsu, so when he finally understood what was happening to him, the effect of telekinesis wasn't that big of a problem anymore. He once again learned and adapted. Bang! Ga! Yamcha spit blood from the elbow to the gut, his grip almost loosened but he held on once more. Ga ha ha ha! Bang! 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 The Cell Jr. kept hitting Yamcha in the kidneys, again and again, causing his eyes to become bloodshot, but neither Yamcha nor Chitsu let go. Tien! Hurry up! Yamcha yelled, and Tien's veins bulged. He focused more intensely and kept pumping energy into his tri-beam. He was charging this single attack all this while. A full-power tri-beam shot. With this one he will exhaust all his energy at once, so this needs to hit. Bang! 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 Aik! Tien! Clenching his jaw, Tien finally managed to put the last of his energy into his attack and yelled out loud. Now, Yamcha! Huum! Letting go of the Cell Jr., Yamcha narrowly dodged the yellow beam of energy. His hands protected his eyes as his body tumbled away from the sheer force of the attack. Huff huff huff. Did we make it? Yamcha asked while clutching his side. His gaze was focused on the mountain the Cell Jr. collapsed into. The one tri-beam carved a square hole in. Crash! The rocks on the mountain kept falling down. Tien, Yamcha and Chitsu were all down for the count, and all three were watching the mountain. Huum! But the sudden flare of aura had them shrink their eyes. The rocks scattered and there he was. The Blue Cell Jr. was hurt and burned pretty badly, his body scarred, but he was standing. Damn, what now? Yamcha punched the ground in frustration. All three helplessly watched the Cell Jr. tilt his head and laugh. Ho 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 dash. Boom. But the sudden meteor-like strike happened right on top of the Cell Jr., creating massive hemisphere of green energy. The type of energy specific to Raditz. This caused the Z fighters to stagger and look at each other. Was that Cell? Asked Krillin. That meteor that hit the Junior back then looked an awful lot like Cell. Goku rubbed the back of his neck and laughed merrily. Yeah, that was Cell all right. Swish. As soon as Goku's words were over, Raditz teleported before the Z fighters. His battle armor was in pristine condition, and his hair was white while his eyes gray. You did it, Uncle Raditz. Thanks for the save, man. Gohan and Yamcha said one after the other. Raditz just breathed out and cancelled his Ultra Instinct, then nodded with a tired smile at both of them, before correcting Gohan. He's not dead yet, but he is out for the count. Cell, unlike 17 and 18, can get hurt and get weaker as a result. This was why he gladly accepted the senzu bean Goku gave him in original. Now that he had fought against the legendary Super Saiyan and was decimated beyond belief, he was basically a goner. But Piccolo didn't like taking chances, so he said, "Finish him off, don't keep him around." Hearing that, Raditz scratched his cheek and said helplessly, "I overestimated myself. Ultra Instinct is too taxing on the body. I am a bit too tired to finish the job right now." Piccolo twitched his eyes at Raditz. "Usians. Fine, I'll do it myself," Piccolo said before cracking his knuckles. The dust had now cleared and the gasping Cell was visible to all. He was beyond brutalized, his natural armor was shattered, his wings snapped, his tail was torn, yet he looked angry. He couldn't believe it. He was perfect. How could this be? Watching Piccolo walk towards him, Cell finally began feeling the fear his victims felt. He started crawling back. He was afraid. He was going to get killed. He had to do something, but there was nothing he could do. Damn it. Chapter 122. Golden Uzuru. Cell was struggling on the ground, wanting to crawl away, but he was so brutally injured that even that was hard for him to do. And Piccolo was just about to arrive. He was doomed. I should have finished off Raditz before this. Damn it. Not everyone has the chance to receive a beatdown from the legendary Super Saiyan. It's a special kind of an experience. The experience of fighting against an unstoppable force without an immovable shield isn't a pleasant one, but it's surely one of a kind. Hey, let me take care of him, will ya? Piccolo heard these words just when he was about to strike Cell. Turning back, he saw Nappa coming from behind. Frowning his brow, Piccolo looked at Nappa, and Nappa stared back while slowly explaining his part. He killed Vegeta, let me finish him off in King's place. Nappa's resolve was there, and Piccolo, who had fused with Kami, wasn't as heartless as his previous self. He understood what it meant for Nappa to do this. Vegeta was a Saiyan under Raditz's rule, and Raditz the Saiyan King was unable to finish him off, so Nappa wanted to do this in his stead. Both for Raditz's pride and for his personal revenge, he wanted to kill Cell on his own. Nappa might not show it, but he was the most caring Saiyan of them all, at least the one who identified the most with his people if nothing else. Alright, have at it, be sure to finish him off. Piccolo backed away, giving Nappa the position, and Nappa smirked right away as he watched the struggling Cell. Ha ha ha, don't worry about it, I'll go all out. Nappa laughed out loud. He was ultimate Nappa right now. This should be enough to finish off the brutalized super perfect Cell, but for the sake of caution, he decided to use his strongest trick. You see this Cell, this is Saiyankind's strongest ability. Nappa raised his palm up in a grip-like fashion, and concentrated. Weeing. Soon a bright ball of energy began to take shape on top of Nappa's palm. Smirking while looking at the artificial moon in his hands, Nappa raised his hand and threw it up into the sky with a shout. Ha! Watching the moon rush up and position itself at a considerable height, Nappa started staring at it. Currently only Raditz and him had tails, all others lost theirs sometime or the other, so he didn't worry about someone like Kakarot who was without training transforming by mistake. Growl. Nappa soon started to growl as his eyeballs turned red, His height began to rise exponentially and his body began to bulk up even more. Soon after a few seconds, a tall Uzuro stood in place of Nappa, roaring into the air to show its arrival. Mystic Uzuro or Ultimate Uzuro, which one sounds better? Raditz wondered. Nappa went Uzuro after a long time. No Xian had went Ultimate Uzuro until today. This was a brand new thing. Raditz had no idea how this form would behave. Cell, go to hell. But Nappa looked just fine, so Raditz let his worries go. After all, Ultimate was just using all of your strength in base. This was not that different from Nappa going Uzuro normally. Cell himself looked utterly terrified and angry. He looked at the massive Nappa and that moon which was responsible for this. Damn it! Why? I am the perfect Bane. Hi. Cell stuttered mid-sentence and became silent. This seemed weird to Nappa, but he didn't pay it much mind. After all, people giving up hope before unwinnable circumstances wasn't all that uncommon. But Cell was feeling something different. His mind was becoming hazy for some reason. He wasn't able to think clearly, as if going into a daze. Thump. Piccolo's eyes narrowed. Courtesy of his ears, he heard a loud heartbeat just came from Cell. Piccolo then looked at Cell closely. Cell looked like he was staring blankly at the artificial moon, as if he had given up all hope. But Piccolo had a bad feeling about this. Something was feeling off. Nappa, don't waste time. Finish him off quickly. Piccolo said out loud, but most of the Z fighters, Nappa included, weren't all that worried right now, so Piccolo's words caught them off guard. Yamcha waved his hand at Piccolo and laughed. Relax, Piccolo, Cell has given up hope. Look at him, he isn't even trying anymore. But Piccolo wasn't convinced. His feelings of foreboding became stronger by the second. Thump, thump, thump. Nappa, do it quick. Piccolo almost hysterically yelled, and Nappa was taken aback by that. So was Raditz. He didn't know what was wrong with Piccolo as he didn't have Namekian ears, but for Piccolo to act like this, something had to be off. Nappa finally snapped out of being yelled at by Piccolo, but he also didn't understand why Piccolo was acting this way, and Nappa was a Xian. He didn't like getting commanded. Gur, don't lecture me, Namekian, I'll punish him first. Piccolo spat hearing those words. This idiot. Not caring about anything else, Piccolo directly charged up a Masenko and blasted it towards Cell. Hey. Nappa barked angrily. This was his prey. Piccolo was out of line. The Z fighters were surprised at Piccolo's actions as well. It was an unspoken rule to not interfere in someone's battle, but soon they widened their eyes, because even with Piccolo drowning Cell in Masenko, Cell's energy didn't dissipate. Piccolo, what's going on? Raditz asked, slightly shocked. He didn't like this one bit. Something weird was happening to Cell. He should have been dead from the blast just now. But Piccolo didn't have to answer Raditz. The low growl escaping from Cell's throat did. Growl. Raditz widened his eyes. Cell was growing in size. His energy was spiking every second and his eyes went completely bloodthirsty. Oh shit, is that an Uzuro? Cell can go Uzuro. Raditz cursed in himself for missing something obvious like this. Of course Cell could go Uzuro. Why wouldn't he? He had seen DNA inside of him. He could go Super Saiyan. He had a tail. Everything needed to go Uzuro was right there. The only reason he didn't go Uzuro in original was because it was daytime and there wasn't a moon. But the most problematic of them all was the Cell was a Super Saiyan, so this wasn't any normal Uzuro, this was a golden Uzuro. Damn it. Piccolo angrily spat. His attack failed and now Cell was stronger than ever. Raditz was tired from Ultra Instinct. Besides him, none of them were capable of beating even Super Perfect Cell. Now Cell went ahead and multiplied his power so many times on top of that. The gigantic Cell had completed his transformation, yet he didn't seem to care as he roared and flailed around instinctively. Nappa's eyes shrunk as that large flailing hand rushed towards him. Bang. Somehow from raw experience, Nappa managed to block it in time, but the sheer weight behind the attack threw his massive Uzuro body into the air. Crash. His body crashed into the mountains. Nappa's large physique crushed the cliffs like sand castles, yet his body tumbled backwards even more before finally coming to a stop after hitting another cliff. Huff huff. Nappa looked at his hands. They were shaking from resisting the impact just now. Nappa realized he had just made a horrible blunder. Not only did he not avenge Vegeta, he also put all of them in hot water. Now they were tired, one man down and Cell, their enemy was 10 times as strong as he was before. Victory which was within their grasp was lost just like that. Chapter 123 Cell Max. The gigantic Cell roared. He was going crazy and flailed around his massive body. His mouth was releasing energy waves in the air without any aim. He was simply an out-of-control Uzuro that didn't have his mind in place, but Raditz was thankful for that. Cell is behaving just like Cell Max did again. Gohan Beast. Is this what Dr. Hito meant by making a stronger version of Cell? So Cell Max was just Cell with his Uzuro genes unlocked permanently? That explains his massive size and a lack of mind, I suppose. Raditz dodged a mouth blast while thinking wildly. He just went from fighting against Super Perfect Cell to Cell Max. There was a massive difference in power between those two, but there was one more thing Raditz was worried about. If he gains control of Golden Uzuro, will he go Super Saiyan 4? Although GT was non-canon, there were no black Dragon Balls on the lookout either. The design of Super Saiyan 4 was once drawn by the author himself. The Akari mode Broly used had the same eyes as Super Saiyan 4, so if nothing else, at least the transformation had chances of existing, even if the universe that showed it didn't. And Raditz did not want to risk this at all. One Cell Max was more than enough headache. Everyone, aim for the artificial moon. Just when Raditz was thinking about the implications of Golden Uzura, Goku came in a pinch. He had thought of the best strategy almost immediately and brought everyone together to execute it. Cell Max was flailing around the artificial moon right now, so their attacks might hit or miss because of his gigantic body coming in between, but if so many of them attacked together, one of them was bound to hit. Goku's exclamation made everyone prepared, so the Z-fighters began charging their individual attacks. Piccolo prepared a special beam cannon, Tien and Chitsu charged up their Dodon Ray, Yamcha used Spirit Ball, Krillin gathered a split Kamehameha, Gohan created a Masenko, Goku decided to go for the regular Kamehameha, Uzura Nappa's mouth became blue from the mouth blast he was about to unleash. As for Raditz, he used his self-made eraser cannon, gotta respect his legendary status after all. Cell Max, who was still roaring, had no intentions of turning around or caring about the upcoming attacks, he had obviously lost it completely. The Z-fighters took this opportunity and finally, opened fire. Whoom! Multiple energy attacks rushed towards the artificial moon, and Cell Max, who was standing before it, bore the brunt of majority of them. Boom! A large explosion happened right on Cell Max's body, and he roared out in pain, but the wave after wave of energy beams continued to strike him, making him stagger backwards with each attack, his flailing arms slowly moving away from the reach of the artificial moon. And finally, a white ball of energy managed to strike the artificial moon. Boom! Detonating the whole thing, this made Nappa Oa's growl and start to shrink back down. And after a few seconds he was back to his original look, but Nappa didn't seem happy at all. His eyes looked fearful as he looked at the regenerating Cell Max, not the least bit weakened. How? This shouldn't be happening, Nappa exclaimed, but Cell Max, who was still growling in pain, had managed to regenerate by now and was glaring at the bugs who had hurt him just now. Goku looked tensed as well. This was out of their plan. If Cell went Uzura, the missing moon should have stopped his transformation. It worked that way for Xians. Tien also sweated quite a lot seeing Cell Max prepare to rush towards them. He was out of energy and had nowhere to dodge. He was a burden right now. Why isn't Cell turning back? Asked Tien to no one in particular. It was more frustration that was speaking. But Raditz kept staring at Cell Max, who remained the way he was and was beginning to understand what the problem was. Looking at the group, who were either upset or downright clueless, Raditz decided to tell them what went wrong. Guys, we seem to have started on the wrong foot. Just because us Xians lose our Uzura when the moon is gone, we thought Cell would do the same. But we overlooked a crucial thing. Cell is not a Xian, he is a hybrid organism. Frieza's transformation abilities, Piccolo giant form, he has them all. Looking seriously at Cell Max, who had begun to run towards them like a wild animal, Raditz finished saying his conjecture. The ability to revert from one form to another is something Cell took from Frieza, and Uzura is a form transformation. Now that Cell has transformed once into his Uzura, this state has been permanently recorded into his DNA. He can stay as Cell Max as long as he wants, just like Frieza. Piccolo looked very afraid after hearing Raditz's conjecture. If this was true, it was the worst-case scenario. Roar! Looking at Cell Max, who was about to collide with their group, the Z-fighters finally collected themselves and jumped out of the way. Raditz picked up Tien, Yamcha, and Chitsu using telekinesis to do the same. They were out of energy and were quite tired. Senzu beans were something they had used up for training as well. Majority of it Vegeta took. This was how he had trained his Super Saiyan Grade 3 to remove its side effects. But sadly, Vegeta was gone, so all those senzus went to waste. Landing on the ground, Raditz used his hands to shield from the gusts of air that blew when the giant Cell Max passed before them. Keeping the trio on the ground, Raditz turned towards them and said, "You guys sit this one out for now." The humans didn't argue on this. They knew they weren't capable of fighting right now, so they nodded and backed off. After the trio backed off, Raditz turned back and looked at Cell Max, who had stopped running after missing them and was turning back to look at them, with anger on his face. An emotion? Shit. Raditz was sweating. Cell was showing the first signs of emotion. He was regaining consciousness, wasn't he? Can't let this happen. We cannot beat a Super Saiyan 4 equivalent of Cell right now. Even if that doesn't happen, one CONC's Golden Uzura is enough for us to get trashed. Raditz thought of this and immediately turned towards the Z-fighters and exclaimed, "Guys, Cell is regaining consciousness. We have to finish him now." The Z-fighters were surprised after hearing that. They thought Uzura was hard to tame, but then they too found out Cell was really starting to show signs of consciousness again. And they also came at the same conclusion. If Cell isn't killed right now, they wouldn't stand a chance against him after this. The only reason they were able to dodge Cell Max was because he was functioning solely on instinct. If this amount of raw power was used in a controlled fashion, they would perish instantly. Chapter 124. Dance. The situation was critical, but the Z-fighters weren't a bunch of cowards either. All of them were the best of best in their own right. Even then, Cell Max was becoming dangerous by the second, and they didn't have a single clue on what to do. How were they supposed to hurt him? Cell was 10 times as strong as his super perfect self. His version of Super Saiyan 2, that was a 1000 times multiplier on his base. Their best fighters were roaming around 100 times multipliers at best. This was a horrible matchup. "Goku, what do we do?" Krillin yelled while trying to stay away from Cell's hands, which were swatting him away like a fly. The Z-fighters were flying all around Cell to confuse him right now, but that would only last so long. Goku meanwhile was frowning his brows in frustration. His mind was working rapidly, but he wasn't able to come up with anything. I don't know Krillin, we have tried hitting him with our strongest attacks, but it didn't work. When they tried to destroy the artificial moon, most of their attacks had landed straight onto Cell Max, but the only thing that did was hurt him, not kill. And when Cell wasn't killed all at once, he regenerates, especially now as Cell Max's regeneration had gone above and beyond. Boom. Out of nowhere, Goku heard Cell finally managing to hit someone and his head snapped towards the sound, then he saw who was hit. Raditz? Are you okay? It was Raditz who couldn't dodge and was hit by Cell Max. Goku quickly sensed Raditz's energy and initiated instant transmission. Swish. And appeared besides Raditz, who was lying down on some rocks while panting. He was pretty much sucked dry after his use of Ultra Instinct a while back, then the constant fight against Cell Max made him unable to rest even for a little while. Raditz was dead tired right now. The only reason he wasn't out of the game directly was because he was the legendary Super Saiyan. Anyone else in his place would either be knocked out or dead. Huff huff, Kakarot. We gotta kill Cell somehow, Raditz said in a tired voice. He was huffing and puffing with each sentence, but he was after all the legendary Super Saiyan. As he laid there and time passed, he was slowly regaining his breath back. If the Z-Fighters could keep Cell busy for an hour or so, Raditz can fully recover on his own, but there was the problem. Cell Max was regaining consciousness. They didn't have the luxury of time. Goku scratched the back of his head with frustration as well, before saying, "But I can't think of anything, Raditz. He is too strong. None of our best attacks did anything. I don't think there is anything we can do right now." Raditz expected the answer, but he still had to try, because there is no way he wanted to go down without a fight. Looking at the increasingly difficult to dodge Cell Max, who was uncaring about his surroundings, but wasn't able to gain the upper hand due to people working together. Wait. Working together. Raditz's eyes narrowed. He looked at Goku, who was standing beside him and staring at Cell Max, then took a deep breath. He had an idea. "Hey Kakarot, let's fuse." Goku turned to look at Raditz and asked in a confused voice. "Fusion? What's that?" Raditz had by now caught his breath and picked himself off the ground, but he still didn't stand up. He preferred to sit while explaining his plan. It's a technique performed in the form of a dance. It allows two fighters of equal strength to fuse and create a stronger fighter. That might be our only hope right now. Goku had a thoughtful look to him after hearing that, but he didn't want to see Cell Max destroy everything either. Goku wasn't one to complain, but deep down he wasn't happy that so much destruction had been caused because their target was him. He didn't want Cell or Gero to continue their destruction or new enemies to constantly come for him, all the while destroying Earth and killing wantonly. He knew he liked to fight, but he was also a person with a sense of responsibility. In the original, he decided he would rather stay dead if this stops enemies from coming for Earth and his family. This was the reason the self-righteous Shishi was said to have mellowed down after Goku's dead. She knew him very well, and she understood perfectly that he had done this for them. To keep the Earth, his friends, and his family safe. So for a Goku like this, even though he wanted to fight Cell head-on, if there was a need to end this quickly, he didn't mind using fusion. "Okay, let's do this," Goku said after making a decision. He had a serious look on his face, but his smile was there as well. One could tell, he had made a decision. Raditz nodded with relief after hearing Goku's decision. He was a Saiyan as well. He knew how gaining power by something like fusion felt to them. It was a shit feeling, as if one wasn't good enough to finish a job by oneself. This was why they refrained from fusion later on. This was not a good feeling. The human equivalent of this would be you owning a trailer when your rival owns the world. This was how exaggerated the feelings of being inferior to an enemy felt to a Saiyan. Although this was dumb, this was all a part of warrior instincts ingrained within a Saiyan. "Kakarot, pay attention, I'll show you how it's done." Raditz didn't worry about the Z-Fighters not understanding what they were doing. Not only was Piccolo there to tell them, they could also see their strongest warriors were trying to think of a plan. "Stand like this. I know this a bit funny looking, but bear with it." Then Raditz showed the entirety of fusion dance from memory. His memory was after all also upgraded with his legendary transformation. Remembering exactly how fusion dance was shown in the series wasn't hard. The concept of fusion dance wasn't difficult at all. All it required was a correct posture and an equal amount of ki. Okay, I'll give it a try. Goku scratched his head after looking at the funny dance, but didn't mind too much, and started to try the individual poses one by one. Raditz also corrected them one by one while practicing it himself on the side. After all, it was better to practice for a longer time than to fuse incorrectly and waste half an hour to try again. And so, Raditz and Goku started dancing awkwardly to the side while the Z-Fighters' sweat dropped. If Piccolo didn't tell them this was supposed to be a technique, they would seriously lose it. Chapter 125 Raditz. It took Goku and Raditz a whole 15 minutes to figure out the steps needed to perform the fusion dance, both separately and with a partner. Even the finger-touching step was practiced as a separate move multiple times so nobody messes up the fusion. They can't afford to do that anymore. Cell Max was already starting to say some words like die. Him regaining his vocabulary was a sign of higher brain functions, which wasn't good news for anyone. "Huff, alright Kakarot, I think we got this down pretty perfectly," Raditz said after looking at Goku's perfect fusion dance moves, then decided it was now time to give it a try. Goku was relieved and wiped his sweat after his brother's confirmation. It sure was tough to master this dance while synchronizing with another person. And now came the second part of the fusion dance. Goku, whose base form was Super Saiyan because of his training in the time chamber, had started to do something weird. He was powering down, while keeping himself as a Super Saiyan. But nobody found it weird, for it was the correct way to do the fusion dance. The more hectic one's state is during fusion, the less time the fusion would last. So it was either Goku lowering his power to match Raditz's base, which was somewhere between Super Full Power Saiyan and Goku's base, or Raditz going a carry to match Goku's Super Saiyan, which would then put the fusion under strain. Which one of these they had to choose wasn't that hard to understand. Whoosh. So after a few more seconds of sensing Raditz's ki and lowering his Super Saiyan state to that level, Goku gave a nod. Raditz also uncrossed his hands and cracked his neck, who knew his first fusion would come so suddenly. Huff. Alright Kakarot, let's get this over with. Yay, let's do this. Taking their position, the two brothers put their hands on opposite sides and pointed with their fingers in a funny way. Phew. They next began to walk on tiptoes and started approaching each other in a mirrored way. Sion. As they reached the correct distance, they both bent towards each other at once and their stretched fingers touched. Absolutely perfectly. Ha. Zoom. A massive spike of ki brought the Z fighters' attention on the now merging shapes of Raditz and Goku. Even the uncontrollable Cell Max had stopped trying to swat away the flies as he watched the threatening energy body. Woom asterisk. And before the eyes of the Z fighters and Cell Max, the fusion body finally became one from two separate people, and with a last flickering glow, the energy surrounding the new figure disappeared. Watching the tall guy with white baggy pants, orange-black open-chested jacket, a Goku-like face and Raditz-like hair, the Z fighters looked at each other in shock. Wow, is that you Goku? Or are you Raditz? I can't tell. Krillin said while looking confused at the new warrior before them. Raditz and Goku looked similar from the beginning, being brothers, but now there was no possibility of telling them apart. Hearing Krillin's words, the new warrior slowly opened his eyes, and looked at him with a smirk. Me? I am neither Raditz nor Kakarot. You can call me Raiderot. A voice which was distinctly two voices speaking together emerged from the new fighter, but it didn't seem off-putting in the slightest. It gave off a divine echo-like feeling. Coupled with the explosive power they could feel Raiderot emit, they knew they had a powerful member amongst them. Cell, you have been raging for quite a while now, let's put you to rest shall we? Raiderot wasted no time in turning towards Cell and giving a smirk, and then right before everyone's eyes, swish, he vanished, and reappeared in front of Cell Max's face, with a face that showed absolute confidence. The Z fighters as well as Cell were startled by this display, because the speed that Raiderot had just shown, none of them could follow. Incredible, this wasn't instant transmission, but I couldn't follow it at all. Piccolo thought while sweat appeared on his forehead. This guy Raiderot was extremely strong, too strong, the strongest they had ever seen. And scariest of them all, he wasn't even transformed yet. Raiderot himself seems to be always smirking, and appeared to be enjoying the power boost himself as well. Being a new fusion, he wasn't very well versed in his abilities. Even Vegito had to do basic punches and kicks after his first fusion against Buu. Still, Raiderot preferred to learn as he fought. This was the aspect of Goku that was shining through him. If it was Raditz alone, this wouldn't have been his first choice of action. But so was fusion. You never know what kind of warrior you are going to get. It was entirely a matter of which traits were more dominant. Growling. Cell Max, who still hadn't moved from the moment Raiderot had shown up, growled. Raiderot looked amused at Cell Max and then, without any signal, snap, kicked the nose of Cell Max's massive head. Without even being able to scream, Cell Max's giant body was thrown back, as if it wasn't a tiny human who had kicked him, but a man double his size. Boom. The titanic body collided with the mountains and Cell Max was completely buried into the dust, not moving an inch since his fall. Raiderot, who saw Cell unable to move and lie down motionless, weirdly didn't chase, but folded his hands and waited for his opponent to get up. Again showing the aspects of Goku just after the aspect of Raditz shined through from the previous surprise attack. These two diametrically opposite personalities had blended very well in Raiderot. So although this was a matter of Saiyan instinct, Piccolo didn't seem to appreciate this. Raiderot? What are you doing? Finish him off. Raiderot didn't seem to care and just waved Piccolo off, but before Piccolo could blow his top off thinking the Saiyans were once more going to pull a Nappa on them, Raiderot spoke. Relax, there is no need to chase after him, that's exactly what he wants. The Z fighters looked at Raiderot in confusion, and right at that time, the rocks where Cell Max had been buried started shifting. A hand crawled out of the rubble and slowly Cell Max's body rose from the dust, but this time around he was without his previous rage. Pat, pat, pat. Patting his green bio-armor which was stained with dust, Cell Max stared at Raiderot with interest. When did you find out I was faking it? The Z fighters looked shocked out of their soul. Cell was faking this. Since when? Were they being played like fools the entire time? Raiderot didn't seem surprised in the least. After all, from his previous words he had expected this, so he gave a pleasant smile to Cell before replying. Since the moment you sensed my power and regained consciousness. Tapping his head with his pointer finger, Raiderot smirked. You are kind of easy to get a read on. To everyone this last line seemed like Raiderot was mocking Cell's ability to act, but only Raiderot knew that he was in fact mind-reading Cell, a skill of Raditz he could use to deeper levels due to being a fused being. So it was when you guys fused. Phew, I thought we were unknowingly in danger this whole time. Krillin patted his chest and breathed a sigh of relief. If this was Cell just waiting to surprise them or acting like a beast this entire time, they would worry that he had some plans they didn't know about. Cell smiled back after hearing this answer. He seems to have regained his previous demeanor as he spoke with grace. Ho 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 ho, I see, Raditz is it? Thank you for bringing my mind back, as a token of thanks dash. Die. Completely out of the blue, Cell teleported before Raditz. He had just used instant transmission, and before anyone could even feel surprised at how Cell learned the move, Cell had punched Raditz with full force. Boom. The Z fighters were blown away from the sheer wind blowing off the attack. After stabilizing themselves on various parts of the environment, they shielded their eyes and finally somehow managed to peek at the battlefield. And then they breathed a sigh of relief. This sudden attack of Cell Max attack did indeed connect, but it connected with Raditz's shin. Raditz had easily blocked Cell Max's surprise attack with the ever-present Sun smirk on his face. From the looks of it, this battle was going to turn in their favor this time around. Chapter 126 Volatile Battlefield. Hands folded, spiky hair fluttering in the wind and one leg raised in front in a semi-blocking style. This was how Raditz had countered Cell Max. He was standing mid-air with a smile on his face, and as Cell stared in shock at his attack being blocked so easily, Raditz narrowed his eyes. Swish. Spinning around as if he was standing on clear ice, Raditz smoothly removed his leg from the blocking position and raised his hand, in which a large erasure cannon took shape mid-spin, which Raditz threw like a cannonball on Cell's head. Boom. Causing Cell's head to spontaneous combust, getting erased from existence just like the attack's name would suggest. Cell Max stumbled backwards without a head, but his body still didn't fall down. Cell's hands tried to grab his head by instinct but only managed to grab a stump, causing Cell to stagger back once more, but his panicked state didn't last long. The flesh on his stump unnaturally squished inwards, as if something was hiding inside his torso. Squelch. And just like that, a brand new head popped out of Cell's neck stump, like it was hiding in his torso all along. Raditz looked at the display and thought to himself, Majin Buu and Zamasa's immortality far outclasses this, not to mention this is pretty gross. Of course if it was more useful Raditz won't care if it was gross, but even in usefulness it was far behind the other two. Huff huff huff. Cell Max, who had regrown his head, was scared and panting. This was another attack he couldn't block. What if it wasn't just his head next time? Raditz. Cell growled looking at the waiting Raditz. He wasn't pleased at Raditz's display of skill. He felt like a newbie who was being played around by a senior martial artist. Cell didn't like this feeling. But even in a situation like this, he still didn't panic completely. Raditz, you are very strong, much stronger than me. But how long can you last in that form? Cell asked with a shifty look on his face, something which Raditz caught onto and raised his eyebrows. I can last in this form for 30 minutes, what of it? And just like that, for a good fight, Goku's personality showed itself again, giving away such a crucial detail which Raditz would never have divulged. But once more, Raditz, who was also a part of this fusion, showed his traits, so after he had said this piece of info, his energy had started boiling. He was ready to kill Cell before 30 minutes were over. Cell knew not about this contradictory thinking in his opponent's mind, because all his attention was focused on surviving the upcoming 30 minutes. And he knew only one way he could survive the onslaught. Giving a sadistic look to Raditz, Cell yelled, in an fashion which showed the anger hidden behind his words. What of it? In only 30 minutes, can you kill me? I am Cell. I can regenerate from every wound you can inflict on me. A tiny being like you can never fully eliminate me. I am invincible. Do you hear me? Cell roared, his anger at being nothing but a sandbag showing itself to everyone. But even then, there was an undertone of pride in his words. No matter how much they wanted this to not be true, Cell was indeed correct. Now as Cell Max, he was massive in size. Making sure every single cell of such large creature was erased was really hard. This was something which Raditz had found out as well, it seems, as after hearing Cell's words, his eyes narrowed. You are planning on outlasting me with regeneration. With no further words, Raditz instant transmitted to Cell, creating an eraser cannon with both hands. This had Cell unable to react, and before he could get out of the way, Raditz had unleashed the ever-enlarging erasure cannon upon Cell Max. He had decided to erase Cell, and that was exactly what he was going to do. Aiaiaiaic. Cell screamed in terror as he was getting hit by the light green energy. His body was getting destroyed cell by cell and a searing pain was shooting through him. Sadly, in a few more seconds, the scream stopped abruptly and Cell's body was erased from the world. Did we make it? Asked Krillin in a stammering way. He couldn't sense Cell anymore, so they won, right? The Z fighters also tried to sense Cell, but after a few more seconds, they couldn't anymore, so slowly smiles began to emerge on their faces. We won. We did it. Good job, King, Kakarot. The Z fighters celebrated this win happily, but it was only Piccolo and Tien who were concerned, because Raditz hadn't moved from his spot after he had fired off his erasure cannon. In fact, he looked even more serious than before. Not knowing about any of this, Satan and the camera crew started running towards Raditz, trying to get the latest interview. Wait, something's wrong. Piccolo exclaimed, but it fell on deaf ears as the camera crew was hell-bent on getting the latest scoop. So when a small wiggling green mass appeared mid-air, and in a few seconds grew up to the size of a mountain, the crew were flabbergasted and frozen in place. Satan became so scared watching the mass take on the form of Cell that he screamed out in terror. Boss, save me. Thankfully his shout seems to have been heard, as Raditz flickered before the team, collected them with telekinesis and teleported out of Cell Max's reach. Bang! And just in time too, because that was the exact spot Cell Max's newly regenerated body landed on. With a newfound confidence in his regeneration, Cell Max roared, as if all his worries had been resolved. Ha ha ha, you can't kill me, Raditz. And contrary to normal, Raditz didn't counter Cell's words. Cell Max's instincts were right. He was too big to be killed off in a single attack, and when incinerated, the few remaining cells were too hard to find. He was basically impossible to one-shot, which was the only way to kill him. At least it couldn't be done at the level of power gap they were currently at. But the bad news wasn't only this. Raditz looked seriously at Cell while standing with the camera crew, who were taking a close-up shot of this scene, and Cell dropped another piece of news onto them. You can sense it, can't you, Raditz? That's right, the worse you hurt me, the stronger I'll become. Unless you can kill me before I can regenerate, I will always return stronger. I am the perfect being. Just like in the original, after he had regenerated from a single cell, he had jumped straight to Super Saiyan 2. This time around Cell had experienced something similar as well, and the cause of all this was Saiyan's innate ability, the Zenkai boost. A Zenkai boost was triggered with grievous wounds. For Saiyans this stops being a thing after a certain time, but Cell had significantly improved upon this limitation. Cell had both King Cold's and Piccolo's genes on top of Saiyan genes. Unlike Saiyan's, King Cold's natural body was stronger and his limit higher, and unlike Saiyan's, Piccolo's regeneration can be triggered even when only one cell remained. This makes Cell's Zenkai continue for a much longer time than ours. That means the more I attempt to kill him, the stronger I will make him. Raditz stared at Cell with a frown, and the rest of the Z-fighters looked at Cell's newfound power with sweat pouring down their heads. They only hoped the combination of their best fighters could figure something out. They can still do this, all it needs was a plan to trap Cell so he cannot escape. Chapter 127 Omega Blaster. No matter what the Z-fighters thought amongst themselves, Cell himself was overcome with emotion. Even he didn't know he could get stronger from being wounded badly. He was over cloud 9, because he knew the only remaining way he could die was by getting trapped completely, but he had learned instant transmission just for a case like this. They cannot trap him, they cannot kill him, he was invincible? So staring maliciously at his opponent, Cell smirked. Raditz, come, let's continue our tournament. But Raditz wasn't going to have any of this. He shook his head in denial and flickered before Cell. Although this time around, Cell could actually keep up with Raditz's speed. And Cell didn't waste time either. With his nails pointed towards Raditz, Cell used his palm like a knife and slashed. This speed. Raditz twitched his eyes. Cell's speed had caught up to him in fused state. And Cell's nails were not something that should be blocked head-on, so Raditz swiftly raised his hands before him. Bang! And a round bubble-like green barrier covered his body, which blocked the hand knife without a single issue. Cell didn't seem to care about this and took his hand back, then immediately started throwing a barrage of slashes with both hands. Bang! 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 Hitting the barrier again and again, this constant onslaught began to finally crack the barrier bit by bit, and all of a sudden, crash! The barrier broke down completely, launching Raditz's body into the mountains, crashing into the rock formations, burying his body into the rubble. Dad, Uncle Raditz! Gohan exclaimed with fear. Raditz was hit, how could it be? But Nappa put a hand on top of Gohan's head, stopping the kid's mood swings. Kid, relax, Raditz isn't out of the game just yet. And true to Nappa's words, the rubble was blasted away and a completely fine Raditz appeared on the ground, standing without any injuries. He seems to have not felt it at all and just stood there, menacingly. Cell also didn't expect his attack to do nothing at all and was thus taken aback, but he soon collected himself. No matter, I can't kill him and he can't kill me either. But I am perfect, and he is on a time limit, all I have to do is hold on until my time runs out? Is that it, Cell? Sorry, you won't get that chance. I don't make the same mistake twice. Remember who you got that trait from, Cell. Raditz completed Cell's thoughts with a smile, then before Cell's morphed face he clenched both of his fists and bent down. H-A-A-A-ah. And began to yell. Raditz's energy burst out of him with this yell and continued to climb upwards in an exaggerated fashion. Soon the white aura surrounding him slowly began to flash a golden yellow. The Z-fighters looked at this display with open eyes and Cell exclaimed with fear. No, impossible? How can you go Super Saiyan? Raditz was never able to go Super Saiyan. This was a piece of information Cell knew very well. He had also speculated after his recent Cell Max form, that Raditz's yellow-eyed state was related to Uzuru, and this required a tail, which was something Goku didn't have. That's why neither Cell nor the Z-fighters expected Raditz to transform. Neither of the fusion partners could do each other's transformation, so how was the fusion supposed to transform into anything? Heya! But the exaggerated ki which was shaking the very planet was telling them clearly, not only could Raditz go Super Saiyan, his Super Saiyan was in a league of its own. Whoom! With the skies shaking and the ground crumbling, Raditz's hair began to flash yellow, his already tall body started bulking up and his eyes went completely white. What is that? That's not Super Saiyan at all. Nappa stuttered, because this form of Raditz might look like a Super Saiyan, but there were some very big differences. The power boost for one was absurdly high, it went way beyond 50 and was almost reaching a 500 times boost. Raditz's eyes had become completely white, having rolled to the back of his head. And lastly his body, His body bulk had increased tremendously. He was a mountain of muscle, but something told the Z fighters he wasn't limited by speed nor stamina. Could this be the legendary Super Saiyan? Gohan asked tentatively. He knew Raditz was the legendary Super Saiyan, but nobody had seen his version of the transformation yet, so maybe his dad's fusion with his uncle also resulted in a legendary Super Saiyan. After all, one of the participants was a real legendary Saiyan. This question of Gohan also made every Z fighter's mind click into place all at once. Yes, this could be it. Yes, this is definitely the legendary Super Saiyan. Nappa exclaimed with a large smile on his face. He saw it at last, the Super Saiyan of the legend. No wonder that being was so revered. When their transformations were struggling around a 50 times, Raditz had directly gone up to a 500 times. This exaggerated transformation of his has to be the one in the legend, or it simply wouldn't make sense. No. This couldn't be happening. Cell's loud booming voice brought everyone's attention back to him, and then they understand how scary this transformation was to the person facing it. Raditz, completely ignoring everything, had stopped yelling by now, and seems to have completed his transformation to his satisfaction. His golden hair had a tint of green aura around it. His featureless white eyes were staring right at Cell. He had made no sound, but Cell's own heartbeat was making the sounds for him. Cell was terrified. He was shaking in his boots. The level of power he was feeling coming from Raditz was something which made him freeze in place. No, spare me. Please. Spare me. Cell turned around and ran. His fear had made him irrational. He didn't care about the tournament anymore. He didn't care about killing Goku. All he wanted to do was get out of here, someplace away from this monstrosity. Raditz didn't move hearing Cell's pleas of mercy, but the veins bulging on top of Raditz's forehead had shown he wasn't in the mood to let Cell go and continue his killing. Whoosh! Flying into the air in a semi-normal speed, Raditz watched Cell Max make a run for it. He was flying into the skies, trying to escape the planet altogether. Cell's speed was fast and soon he was out of their eyes, but Raditz's featureless eyes seemed to see him very clearly. Omega Blaster. These two words were the only thing that came out of Raditz's mouth, before the entire world changed colors. It started from the energy being collected in Raditz's palms, then the world soon changed to a gray, which flipped to a green, then a yellow and soon a white. The entire environment was acting as if another dimension was taking over the world, but the Z fighters could sense, so they knew this was just the after effects of Raditz's ki being gathered. When the weaker Z fighters really began to think the world would end like this, Raditz took his hands back and got into a throwing pose. Narrowing his eyes, Raditz's veins bulged, putting a tremendous amount of force into his hands. Zoom. He let the attack go. The Omega Blaster zoomed towards Cell, who had run to other space and crossed the large distance in almost a few seconds, leaving only an instant for Cell to turn and watch the attack coming towards him from the blue planet. Why, I am the perfect being. An explosion of gigantic proportions detonated in the void of space. The side of the Earth facing the explosion was bombarded with so much light that all anyone could see for a while was white. And all anyone could hear was a strong ringing sound, from the atmosphere itself shaking. It was as if everyone on Earth had taken Krillin's solar flare attack to the face. But thankfully, this state of Earth didn't last long, and after the Z fighters could finally see, they found that Raditz, Dad, Uncle Raditz, had split back into Raditz and Goku. Ha ha ha, I am here, son. Goku replied back tiredly, and sat down onto the ground without any image. The last attack they made had sucked so much energy out of them that the fusion broke down almost immediately, so Goku was very tired right now. And Raditz on the side wasn't any better. He too collapsed onto the ground, but he didn't even bother to sit. He straight up lied down onto the ground. We made it. Cell is dead. Thank God, we came too close to messing up big time. With these thoughts, Raditz laid there as the Z fighters began to talk and the camera crew began to hype. He didn't care about any of that. All he wanted to do was relax for a while. He had done enough for today. He deserves some. Chapter 128. Baby Boom. A year passed after the defeat of Cell, and this entire year was very much packed full of events. The whole world had seen the Cell games. Capsule Corporation satellites had also released pictures of Cell getting disintegrated in space. Coupled with deliberate propaganda from King Furry, the Earthlings knew how big of a crisis this was. Dr. Gero was hung on a pillar of shame and Raditz was sung as the hero. This year Satan dressed as Raditz made far too many tours around the world, pushing Raditz's fame to an all-time high. Although Raditz roaming around with Satan's family in tow had brought up some questions, Bulma had angrily censored them all. Bulma has also been very busy as a result this year, not only busy managing Satan's mess, but also managing Raditz Jr., her son and the current Sun Prince. Raditz, can you look at Junior for a while? I can't come over right now, Bulma yelled from her lab, and Raditz, who was meditating, opened his green eyes hearing that. His gaze turned towards the crib where a smaller version of him was trying to climb over using his tail and making a mess of his surroundings. Giving a slight smile, Raditz breathed out and his eyes turned back to black, so did his blonde hair. Walking towards his son, Raditz Jr., named just like Halcyon royalty were supposed to be named, Raditz picked up the little thing. Duh. But Raditz Jr. was fearless and began to laugh happily, prompting Raditz to sit him on top of his shoulder and walk towards the garden. You little guy, Dad is trying to control his Super Saiyan. Did you have to make a mess right now? Raditz Jr. of course didn't understand a word and only laughed happily because he was sitting on top of his dad's shoulder. Shaking his head, Raditz patted the long mane of his son. The hair was exactly his copy and so was everything else. You laugh, but this is important, you know. Bu will come out in a few years. I can't be a raging monster before him. Your dad's the legendary Super Saiyan. Although this gives him invincible power, his Super Saiyan is just as hard to control. So cut me some slack and let me practice, okay buddy? At least be quiet until I can combine a carry with my Super Saiyan. The resulting baby talk only had Raditz sigh. He knew he wasn't going to get the time to train with all his heart right now. Amongst all his kids, Raditz Jr. was the toughest to handle. It wasn't just his playful personality, it was his extremely high power level. The baby was born with a power level of 10,000. You know, little guy, I almost thought you were also a legendary Super Saiyan, but your mom says you are just really strong because you inherited my body. Talk about taking a shortcut to success, none of your siblings have what you have, they weren't as lucky. Of course, Raditz Jr. also wasn't as lucky as he could have been. After all, he was also conceived before Raditz had transformed into the legendary Super Saiyan. It was just that the android arc's span was much shorter compared to the original, and Raditz Jr. also took an unusual amount of time to be born, or his birth would have been sooner and not after Cell's defeat. Bulma still wasn't sure why Raditz Jr. took a longer amount of time to be born, but the tests showed he was healthy, so the conclusion they derived was that his 10,000 power level was too much for Bulma to handle, resulting in a longer development time. While Raditz was thinking all this, he had arrived and was now sitting in the garden, and right after he sat down, Ranfan came running over with sparkles in her eyes. King, are you out for a walk? Raditz turned towards Ranfan and smiled. She also had a bald baby girl in her arms. The tail hanging behind her signified her status as a Saiyan. Oh Ranfan, I am taking the prince out for a walk. How are you? How is little Fasha doing? Poking the baby girl in her cheeks, Raditz said softly. You truly take over your father. Turning his eyes towards that shining bald head, he stifled his laughter and said, in more than one way. But Ranfan caught on to that and twitched her eyes, but there wasn't much she could do. This was the king of the world, and he was right as well. Fasha was born bald like most babies, but she should have grown hair by now. Although Nappa consoled her that he had a head full of lush hair in his youth, this wasn't enough to elevate her worries. She was a beautiful woman with amazing hair. She would rather have her girl not inherit her father in that regard? Right. Haha. Ranfan laughed dryly and sat herself beside Raditz on the bench. She wasn't a Saiyan, she was an Earthling, so even when Nappa told her it's not needed to be on good terms with his boss or that it's not necessary to curry favor from him, she didn't listen. All she knew was that being associated with Raditz and being his right-hand man gave Nappa the fat paycheck which her house ran on, so she took it upon herself to keep friendly relations with his boss, even if her husband was too simple to understand this fact. There she goes again, she should seriously listen to Nappa. It's not like I am gonna ditch him for another Saiyan, there aren't any left. Raditz internally thought, while just nodding along with whatever Ranfan was talking about. His mind was pretty relaxed right now. Bu was at least 6 years away. He had unlocked his Super Saiyan, completing the Super Saiyan part of his legendary title. Fusing into Raditz gave him a glimpse of how Goku went Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan 2, which helped Raditz finally unlock the form on his own. Although he also went berserk the first time he had used it, it required Goku, Gohan, Nappa, Vegeta, Krillin and Piccolo to fight him desperately for him to regain control. They almost had to be wished back again with how much Raditz had rampaged. Oh hey, is that you Mr. Goku? Ranfan's sudden call alerted Raditz and brought him out of his contemplation. Turning towards the direction Goku's ki was coming from, Raditz saw his brother. But just when he was about to greet him, he noticed a baby in his arms, but the weirdest part was the baby had a halo on his head. Kakarot, how did you get that baby killed? Asked a confused Raditz, hearing which Goku laughed and rubbed the back of his head. He isn't dead. He is Goten. Well, he is somewhat dead, but he is also alive. Goku said while raising a finger. Seeing this further confused Raditz and Ranfan, so Goku explained a little more. I kinda forgot to wish Shishi back with everything going on, so when we wished everyone killed by Cell back I remembered and went to meet her using instant transmission. She was in hell for making a ruckus in King Yema's office, but honestly hell wasn't all that bad. There were many Gohans playing while a lot of books lay around everywhere. Scratching his head, Goku said in a confused voice. But that seems to really make Shishi angry. She was screaming her lungs out and threatening them with something before I arrived. Giving a large smile, Goku then replied, just today King Yema told me Goten was born. He really gave me an earful for this. Supposedly this is the first time a baby is born from living human and someone from the other world. Raditz blinked many times and processed this entire thing. Meanwhile Ranfan was focused on another thing. Su, you tangled with your wife's soul? Then is that child a human or a ghost? Goku laughed as if he didn't even understand the meaning of tangled and explained. Goten is both alive and dead. You see he has this halo because of other world, but he can stay in the living world for as long as he wants. Raditz again blinked, so what his brother meant was that Goten can go into the other world and skip into the living world as he wished. That was sick. Goku's children are in a league of their own right from birth it seems. Chapter 129. 6 years with Raditz fulfilling his role as a dad and Goku bringing a new brother to Gohan, things were going swimmingly for the Z fighters. There was peace, no news of new threats, and this was a fantastic time to relax after the constant high-pressure period that had begun since Raditz arrived. This sense of peace had made some of the Z fighters lazy. Yamcha had stopped training altogether after a year of zero progress. Although Tien and Jitsu trained, they didn't make any progress either. Still, they didn't stop trying even then, constantly looking for a new way out, which they could be seen doing in their dojo. Ha! The yells of students rang in the practice grounds. Tien was sitting and meditating on one of the 3 main seats situated up above. The students themselves were currently being trained by the 2 remaining teachers, Jitsu and Yamcha. Yamcha, unlike the original, had at least somewhat stuck around after getting his confidence back. Because of the potential unlock, he knew he wasn't completely hopeless. Although he had stopped training after an entire year of efforts with no results, his idea was to take a break and see if he gains some inspiration from the students down below. That was why he had decided to stick with Tien when he was offered the position of sensei. Yamcha-sensei, I can feel it. A bald-headed man in his 20s exclaimed with surprise and giddiness. Yamcha turned to look towards the man who had called out to him. Oh Scale, it's you. Did you feel your ki so soon? Man, talk about talented. No wonder Raditz recommended you? Yamcha praised the man. This was a man who had come holding Raditz's recommendation letter. He was one of the first people to join their newly built dojo. In fact, if it wasn't for Raditz advertising this place for them, it would have been impossible for so many students to arrive in such a short time. So although Yamcha gave special attention to Scale because of this, he didn't expect the guy to actually achieve something so quickly. Patting the sweating man on his shoulder, Yamcha grinned. You surprised me. I thought for sure you would have taken a lot longer, with you having no prior martial arts experience and all. Scale wasn't one to get shy over compliments. In fact, he was quite the opposite. He was standing with his head held high and his smirk on for all to see. After hearing this much praise from Yamcha, Scale decided to hide the fact that he was fed nature ki by Raditz, and this was what made him capable of getting a sense of his own ki so quickly. He was already used to manipulating ki before he had even found it. So now that I have completed the first step, what next, Yamcha-sensei? Asked Scale, making sure the surrounding practicing men could hear his voice loud and clear. This was his way of asserting his dominance. In the end, he was a member of society's dark side. His first instinct when coming to a new place was checking the danger levels, and after that was done, asserting his dominance over what he could. This he had done here as well, and gathered a large set of followers very quickly. He was also very sure, after this recent announcement, he would climb even higher on the totem pole. Ha ha ha. Yamcha laughed and gestured Scale to come along with him to another place, which Scale did with his head raised high. But what Scale didn't know was that Yamcha wasn't clueless to all this. After all, he wasn't a martial artist at his core either. He was a bandit. Desert bandit wasn't a job one can take up by being a naive person, so Yamcha was very much aware of everything, but he let it go. The only people who joined Scale ignoring practice were the ones who had no intention of progressing to being with. This just made his job easier in recognizing the good ones. And that makes best of both worlds. I hope one of these remaining people can give me the inspiration I need. Yamcha thought while he showed Scale around his new training room. After that was done, Yamcha left pretty quickly. He still had people to observe and train. Scale saw Yamcha leave, then took in the new training room he was given and breathed a sigh, taking out a wallet out of his pocket. He looked at the picture of his wife Ruli and his son Sharpener. I can do this. If I get sufficiently strong, I will have a stable job in Mr. Raditz's company. Then we can live the life of our dreams. This was what motivated Scale to do what he always did, his family, and while Scale worked on his goals, in another place Vidal was working on her own. Hiya. Kicking the sandbag, Vidal huffed and puffed. She was tired but still willing to train some more. Looking at Vidal's serious face, one wouldn't be able to guess she was a young girl, but this was what dying once had done to her. She had grown up in a day, and after being brought back by Raditz, she had took it upon herself to ask for training. Although Raditz couldn't afford the time to train her personally, he did give her scientific ways to train that Bulma had developed in her spare time. Goten, come here. Contrary to his future wife, Gohan's face was not at all serious and was in fact, very much the opposite. He was playing as happily as he could with his brother. He was so happy he has gotten a brother that he even gave up his study time to play with Goten. So although he was getting a bit behind on study schedule, Gohan was doing just fine otherwise, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And according to Ox King, after what he had gone through, he deserved some time to himself. Mirroring Gohan in his mood, Krillin was also having a great time. He was currently out with his wife Tights and was having a spectacular time. How is that, honey? It's nice, but it's too expensive. Krillin, how about this? The newlywed were shopping around and choosing things for their new home. Their wedding was held a week ago and everyone had come to attend. This was a great day in Krillin's life and it would only get better with Earth being peaceful. While the newlywed duo were running around the mall, 18 was sitting at a restaurant right next to them and eating an ice cream. She was one of the only Z fighter who had nothing to do. She was just walking around randomly, helping people whenever she can, and in her own way trying to right whatever wrongdoing she had committed in the future. She was overall doing okay, just this newly developed habit of eating sweet things was something she wanted to get in control. Who knows if her android body was immune to obesity? This wasn't something she wanted to risk at all. Aiaiaiaic. A loud shout rang while 18 was eating her ice cream, but she didn't hear it, or it was correct to say nobody on Earth heard this. As this was from Vegeta, who was training on another planet and trying to push past Super Saiyan correctly. He was the only Z fighter who didn't stop a single day and trained all the time. His wounded pride pushed him to keep progressing even if there was no new threat, and he could feel it in his bones. He was close to Super Saiyan 2. Just like that, the Z fighters spent their days in their own different ways, and soon days turned to months, and months to years. 6 years went by in a flash and winds of fate had started blowing once more. Somewhere in the vast universe the missing demon king Dabura had set a new destination for his master. The destination? A little-known planet in the North Quadrant called Earth. A/N. Chapter 130. The terrifying Bu in the yard of Capsule Corporation. Two strong fighters were clashing at blinding speeds. Their bodies couldn't be seen by the naked eye, and all one could perceive them by was their tremendous ki. Bang! By pure accident one of the warriors slipped up, but in this high-speed spar this tiny bit of slip-up resulted in him losing control of the entire battle, and getting blasted down to the ground. Boom! Ayak, damn it! The man who was blasted down cried out in pain. His blonde hair and Goku-like face was morphed into a painful look, while his white pants and orange-black half-jacket was stained with dust. Thump! Not minding the state his opponent was in, the warrior who had just defeated the man landed on the ground with a thump. His long spiky mane was yellow in color just like the man below, but his white armor wasn't stained with any dirt whatsoever. One more crucial difference between the man below and the man standing above him was the fact that the winner warrior had no pupils. A pair of pure white eyes were looking down at the fallen warrior with a smile. "You lost, Gogeta," said the winner, and Gogeta angrily punched the ground upon hearing that. "Damn it, Raditz, this is the third time," Gogeta remarked in a pissed-off voice, but before he could try once more against his opponent, his body abruptly shone a blinding light. Whoosh! And split into two separate entities, Goku and Vegeta. Ow, that stings. Damn. But Goku and Vegeta didn't seem surprised by this phenomenon and were still immersed in their defeat just now. Noticing that their fusion time was over, Raditz also powered down and returned to his base form. Sitting down on the ground with the two fighters, Raditz laughed happily. "Thanks for the fight, Kakarot, Vegeta." Hearing Raditz's words, Vegeta only snorted softly and looked away while Goku grinned broadly. "Don't mention it, I got a lot of training done too, but Raditz, have you managed to combine your Akari and Super Saiyan? You have beaten our fusion 3 times in a row." Goku's doubts weren't Goku's alone, they were Vegeta's too, and after seeing Raditz smiling with pride, those doubts were answered once and for all. TCH. Vegeta clicked his tongue at the implications. He didn't appreciate fusion just like most Saiyans, but he had endured it for 2 main reasons. One was to get experience in Super Saiyan 2 from Goku, the second was to experience Raditz's full power for himself. This last part was something he would rather have experienced by himself, but he was so far behind Raditz that it wasn't even a choice. "Kakarot, I am not fusing with you anymore, I will defeat this guy by myself," Vegeta announced while getting up, but his tone didn't have as much spite as it used to have 7 years ago. Unlike the original where only Goku was stronger than him, here he was the weakest adult Saiyan alive. Goku, Gohan, Nappa and Raditz, every single one of these warriors were either stronger than or equal to him. This had Vegeta accept his position on the power scale much faster. So the person who was standing before Raditz wasn't a potential Majin Vegeta anymore, but a Vegeta after his fight against Bu, a Vegeta who had already changed for the better. "The years surely left a mark on you, didn't they, Vegeta?" Raditz thought while watching Goku and Vegeta bicker amongst each other. The 7 long years of peace, having a kid, a caring wife and the gradually multiplying Saiyan race had mellowed down Vegeta by a lot. So much so that Raditz had fully accepted the man as a partner he could trust. "Alright, cut it out you two, don't waste your energy in senseless fighting for now." Goku and Vegeta, who were pulling each other's ears and nose, looked at Raditz simultaneously and asked, "Why?" Raditz ignored the synchronized way of speaking as well as the further snorts of Vegeta, and explained why he was saying what he was saying. "Remember the World Martial Arts Tournament we attended a week ago? I had a feeling that someone was watching us back then." Raditz spoke while remembering the tournament he had attended, figuring he would meet the Spopovich duo soon. But the whole tournament ended and a week went by just like that, yet no Babadai or Dabura had visited them. Raditz couldn't even sense anything out of the ordinary on Earth. It might be magic at play, but knowing the cause didn't solve his problems in this case. The only thing he had going for him now was his ability to feel that someone was looking at him from somewhere. And he could do this only in his legendary Super Saiyan state. "Listen, I have feeling that someone is observing our every move. I do not know what intentions they hold yet. Whatever they may be, it's being hidden from us. And I have a bad feeling about this." Raditz had no way of possibly knowing that Majin Bu exists, so this was how Raditz had spun the tale. But a supposed hunch from the legendary Super Saiyan was more than enough to alert both Goku and Vegeta. "A sneaky guy? Humph, let him come, I'll take care of him." Vegeta folded his hands and said with irritation. He was pretty pissed off at both himself for not realizing this and at the guy who was peeking at them. Goku didn't speak at all but had a thoughtful look to him. Raditz himself didn't say anything more about this issue. It's not that he didn't try finding the duo, he even asked the dragon a few days ago, but the dragon said locating them was beyond his power. This wasn't something that surprised Raditz. The dragon can't affect people stronger than its creator without their consent. And no way would Dabura and Babadai consent to being found. "I seriously hope a high enough firepower can hold Bu down. I don't have much I can use against him unless he goes Kid Bu." Raditz was clueless on what he could do against Bu. Nothing in his arsenal could defeat a Bu who didn't purposely split into Kid Bu. Completely evaporating Bu? Sorry, he can come back from pure smoke. Blasting him to pieces? Nope, he reforms and joins back together like putty. Sealing him somehow? He even broke the dimensional barrier of time chamber with a scream. Good luck trying to seal him without magic. Not only that, he can turn anyone into chocolate, which only he can turn them back from. He is immortal and does not age. He can breathe in space without any problems. He can tire out his enemies then absorb them, making them a part of his own strength. You can't surprise him twice because he can learn any techniques he sees. You can't keep tearing his body apart because he can control torn body parts. He can change his appearance into anything he wants. He can grow extra limbs for the heck of it. He can just mess with someone for an eternity if he feels like it. And you can't even pretend Bu isn't your problem because he will kill anything he doesn't like. Damn, how I do defeat a monster like this? I hope to God he somehow splits into his pure evil version. Only then will Spirit Ball's evil erasing properties work. Shit, even with all this power I am not confident in doing this without Hakai, and I have no idea if Hakai can even kill this dude. It probably can, but Beerus was confident Hakai wouldn't work on immortal Zamasu. Considering the kind of monster Bu is, his immortality might be working in the same way. After all, his inherent immortality feels even stronger than Zamasu's, and Zamasu was granted his by the Super Dragon Balls. Why does a creature this absurd even exist? Raditz tried not to rub the bridge of his nose in frustration. He had trained long and hard and had become extremely strong enough to be on equal footing with Super Vegeto. Putting this into perspective, base Vegeto was stronger than Gohan Bu, and Gohan Bu was the combination of good Bu plus evil Bu plus Piccolo Bu plus Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks Bu plus Ultimate Gohan Bu all wrapped up in one package. And this was just base Vegeto's strength. Raditz was stronger than his Super Saiyan form. The fact that even then defeating Bu seems impossible speaks volumes on how lucky they had gotten in the original. Chapter 131 Supreme Kai. The fact that they were being monitored was something that had stuck with Goku and Vegeta, despite another week passing by without any trouble. This would have been good news and they would have liked their peace to continue, but the sudden call from Raditz broke any and all such fantasies. They are both Kais? Asked Yamcha with a curious look on his face. There were two people sitting on Raditz's couch. One was a tall and serious-looking fellow and one was short but mysterious-looking one. Yes, sorry for calling you warriors on such a short notice, but there is a threat plaguing our universe, and I need your help to defeat it. The short Kai spoke politely yet resolutely. He took a look at all of the Z fighters who had gathered for him, and gave each one of them a sincere smile. Allow me to introduce myself. I am the Supreme Kai of this universe. My name is Shin. The one besides me is my partner, Kibito. The Z fighters heard the introduction and had many questions arise. The most prominent of them was what threat could this possibly be, which required the Supreme Kai to ask for their help in person. And Goku, being the ever straightforward fellow, asked the doubts which arose in everyone's mind. So what do you need our help with? Shin became serious all of a sudden and so did Kibito. Not answering Goku directly, Shin spoke to Raditz. I have come here for Raditz. I have been observing him for a while now, and if anyone can defeat Majin Buu, it's him. Shin continued, trying his best to show a sorry smile after Raditz frowned. He knew Raditz was upset at getting monitored, but he didn't have much of a choice. Standing up on the spot, Shin bowed to Raditz and made an apology. Sorry, but it had to be done. The universe itself is at stake. I couldn't take a risk. Raditz huffed and hid away his annoyance. He had an inkling of an idea that it could be Shin, but he had figured it was probably Babadai. Apparently not. Fine, but do not do it a second time, Supreme Kai-sama. Please come to me directly if you need my assistance. Kibito frowned at Raditz's rudeness but didn't speak up, because frankly, he was scared out of his mind. He was there when Supreme Kai had observed Raditz, and oh my god, why does a mortal have that much power? Raditz's spars had scared him so much he even let go of his God must not be sullied attitude. He would rather pretend he was deaf than clash against Raditz in any shape or form. Shin himself was actually on the same boat as Kibito, but he was more of a good person than Kibito was, so his fear was only momentary. What took over his fear was his sense of duty, and thus he made a hasty attempt to explain his part. I assure you it wouldn't happen again. I wouldn't have arrived all of a sudden if I had a choice in the matter either. Nor would I have called for the best warriors on your planet so abruptly. Taking a deep breath, Shin told them the remainder of the news. Majin Buu is about to be unleashed once more. The evil wizard Babadai is on the move, and is very close to his goal. This was explained by Shin in his most sincere voice, but as soon as he was done, Vegeta scoffed. What of it? Are they so scary? Even a Supreme Kai such as you would be afraid. Kibito almost burst out, but seeing that this was one of the fusion warriors, he shut his mouth just as quick. GHT not know about Majin Buu. Coughing in his hands, Shin gestured with his hands and began to tell the tale of Majin Buu. Majin Buu is a creature that has been around since the conception of the universe. He wasn't evil at first, but as he kept on visiting planets, and kept on absorbing more and more people, he started to slowly turn evil. Many years ago a magician named Bibidai learned to control Buu and used the creature's immense abilities for himself. Remembering the tragic battle where Majin Buu had attacked the scared land of Kais and left him as the sole survivor, Shin involuntarily gripped his fist. Knowing how much destruction he would cause, Grand Supreme Kai gave away his life and was absorbed by Majin Buu. This pacified Majin Buu's evil tendencies almost completely, and Bibidai was soon gone after that as well. Looking at Raditz, Shin said gravely, but his descendant Babadai is trying to make the mistake of releasing Buu once more. He doesn't know what kind of monster Bu is. I alone am no match for Bu. That is why I have come seeking your help. The only one who can defeat Majin Bu is Raditz. Despite being immortal, his power is astonishing. Yamcha laid back on the sofa after hearing Supreme Kai's words, and asked curiously, "Then why did you call us too? We aren't really needed if Raditz can complete the job by himself." The matter-of-fact way Yamcha said it was approved by the Z-fighters as well, although no one was willing to say it out loud. But Supreme Kai had an answer to Yamcha's question. Although only Raditz has enough strength to overpower Bu, he isn't that easy to defeat. I want to invite Raditz to the scared land of Kais dash. Supreme Kai-sama? You must not. Kibito exclaimed. He couldn't help it. That was the land of Kais. How could a mortal set foot in there? But Shin glared at Kibito to shut him up, and continued after giving a sorry smile. In the land of Kais there exists a sword known as Z-sword. Only with that weapon can Raditz defeat Bu. As for everyone else, please, try to stop Babadai from reviving Bu. If we can stop him from unleashing him in the first place, that would be for the best. Because even if Raditz managed to pull out the Z-sword, this might not be enough to defeat Majin Bu. Our best bet would be to stop the threat before it can fully arise. The human Z-fighters understood the sentiment expressed by the Supreme Kai, and so did Piccolo, but it was the Saiyans who weren't fond of this approach. Humph, how scared are you to suggest such a cowardly method? Vegeta scoffed at the duo, something which enraged Kibito and embarrassed Shin. Nappa also gave them a look which obviously said he was looking down on them. But it was Goku who had neither agreeing nor disagreeing looks. He was concentrated on another thing. Is this guy Babadai strong? Asked Goku. Shin was taken aback by the question but answered truthfully. He is a Magican, most of his abilities come from his minions. I am sure someone like you can take down Babadai easily. It is his underlings you have to worry about. The scariest of them all is Dabura, the king of the demon realm. Goku's eyes had a glint appear in them as soon as he heard that, and he promised pretty much immediately. Alright, I am up. I can't wait to fight this Dabura guy. Supreme Kai was confused at the place Goku's attention was at, so he reiterated. Please, you must be as quick as you can. Do not let Babadai succeed. Nappa basically cut him off and waved his hand at Shin. We get it. We'll take care of it. Stop repeating yourself. You sound like a coward right now. Where is your pride as a Kai? Shin looked ashamed but he gritted his teeth. No matter. He might come off as a coward but he had seen Majin Bu and they haven't. If being a coward is what it takes to save the universe, he wouldn't back down, so he was ready to receive all kinds of dissatisfaction. Give him a break you lot. Supreme Kai is trying his best here. There aren't many who can do a better job in his place. But when Raditz spoke out for him, Shin was taken aback and looked at him with wide eyes. He didn't expect Raditz to respect his words even if they were one-sided. Raditz, not minding Supreme Kai's surprise, continued to support him, for his sake that is, because he sure as hell didn't want Majin Bu breaking his confinement anytime soon. Kakarot, Gohan, Nappa and you too Vegeta, don't take a chance. If this Bu fellow is as old as the universe and still isn't killed, he has to be a tough guy. Let's not take a risk we don't need to take. If need be, we will wish upon Shenron to revive Bu at a later time. Supreme Kai almost jumped out of his skin and said hastily, You must not. Raditz turned to him and said, With all due respect Kai-sama, we are Saiyans, running with our tails tucked in isn't our style. And relax, we won't do anything until we are sure that Bu can't defeat us. We will even confirm with Shenron. Although it will take a year for the Dragon Balls to recharge, so relax they will stop Babadai from unleashing Bu. Shin gripped his hands and became quiet, then slowly gave a forced smile. I see. Well, it would be for the best if you can defeat him once and for all. Compromising with Raditz, Shin gave in, and Raditz relaxed as well. Because although he was saying that he will revive Bu, he 100% wouldn't under any circumstances. This was only to satisfy the Saiyan pride of his people, nothing else. He did not need Vegeta or Goku to revive Bu for a good fight. That would be disastrous for the universe. Chapter 132 Monster King. With their next course of action decided, the Z-fighters were ready to set out for Babadai. Supreme Kai's assistant Kibito was given the responsibility of taking them to planet Wasabi, the new lair of Babadai and Dabura. Meanwhile Supreme Kai had decided to go get the Z-sword for Raditz. He could only rest easy with the Z-sword in his champion's hand. Everyone, the future of our universe is in your hands. Supreme Kai inspired the crowd and prepared to show them where Babadai's lair was. Holding his hands up, he used one of God's techniques, creation, to create a model of what he was seeing and then move it in real time. So soon a dimly lit cave appeared before everyone's eyes, and within the cave there stood two people and one giant egg. That's Bu's egg. How did it get there? Thought Raditz. Bu was no longer on Earth. Something had changed due to him being here again. Well, it was to be expected. He was not shying away from showing his fame. Even an alien who just visited Earth would know Raditz within a minute. Those advertising funds weren't being used for nothing. What are they doing? Asked Piccolo. The short ugly one was laughing madly while his tall partner sat on the ground with a slump. He assumed they were Babadai and Dabura. But although Piccolo had asked him a question, Supreme Kai did not answer. His forehead was pouring sweat like never before, and so was his assistant Kibito's. This can't be. When did he collect so much energy? He didn't have nearly as much as this before. Kibito stuttered. They had kept tabs on Babadai and they knew he had come to Earth not only to get Majin Bu's egg, but also to collect enough energy to revive him. So how in the world, with them running out of Earth like that, did they gain enough energy to fill their container? There weren't that many life planets near planet Wasabi for them to loot from. They were missing something. This didn't please the Supreme Kai at all. Everyone, we must hurry. Babadai should never get the chance to use all that energy. Shit, he is trying to revive Bu now. Go, quickly Kibito. Kibito guppled up but somehow stopped his trembling and stared holes into the Z-fighters. Grab onto me quickly. He exclaimed angrily. The Z-fighters too realized the gravity of the situation, so they went ahead and put their hands on Kibito's shoulders. Swish. And vanished using Kai Kai. Meanwhile, a few minutes ago on planet Wasabi. Ugh. Dabura cried out in pain but still held on, all for his master, Babadai. Yes, yes. A little more Dabura, just a little more. Babadai cackled while stabbing into Dabura with a lamp-like device. The device had a needle which kept turning ever so slowly, reaching the symbol which signified full as time passed. But Dabura, who had been stabbed, was definitely not having a good time. He had been getting sucked dry of energy ever since they left Earth. They had refrained from doing that before because he was the bodyguard of Babadai, and who in their right mind would weaken their own guard if they had a choice, but certain circumstances had forced Babadai to make a choice. Still, that didn't make it any better for Dabura, getting his energy sucked dry like that. Master, if you take any more of my energy, I will not be able to protect you. Dabura pleaded. After getting the Majin mark from Babadai, he was loyal to the very core. All these years of servitude had left its mark on Dabura. So although Babadai had been using him as a disposable power bank since they returned from Earth, he wasn't mad. All his worries were there because he had grown weak and wouldn't be able to protect Babadai. Master, let's take a break. I am getting too weak. If the Earthlings get to know about us, we might be in terrible danger. Eee. But Babadai out of nowhere trembled. His hands shook and he gulped his saliva in a fearful fashion. It's the Earth? They are staring at us. Babadai could feel it. His magic was telling him that there was someone on Earth who was watching him right now. Could it be that monster? No, it couldn't be. That monster without pupils. He wouldn't come for them, right? No, he shouldn't. I didn't do anything in his territory. I left Earth as soon as I sensed him. Does he know I took Bu's egg from his planet? That's it. That must be it. He is coming to claim it as his property. Damn it, I knew I should have given him offerings before taking the egg away. He is the king of that planet. Of course he will keep tabs everywhere. Babadai was scratching his wrinkly head in frustration, and hearing his self-talk, Dabura's eyes also shrunk. Does that monster King Raditz know about us? Master, then we must hurry and get out of here. Dabura tried hard to get up. He knew how dangerous that guy was. Their plan was to land on Earth and absorb the energy of the population there to revive Bu. But as soon as they landed on Earth, they saw Raditz's posters and banners everywhere. Thinking this guy is worth taking energy from, being the king of this planet and a strong one to boot, they sneaked into his palace, and then promptly shat themselves. Dabura still remembered the first time he saw Monster King Raditz turn into this super Sun thing. Dabura had personally decided to call that wide-eyed state of his Punisher, because punishment was exactly what he dealt onto his opponents in that form. We cannot run away anymore, idiot. They are about to arrive. Gore, I cannot hesitate anymore. Babadai shook Dabura out of his musings by delivering a sharp pain to his chest. Master. Dabura asked in a shocked fashion. What was Master Babadai doing? But Babadai had blood in his eyes. He said in a vicious voice. I can't hesitate anymore. As long as Bu is revived, I can contend against anyone, that monster included. Okay, maybe not him, but I can still run away. I got to hurry. And just like that, before Dabura's rapidly clearing eyes, Babadai decided to trade Dabura's life for Bu. When his life finally flashed before his eyes, Dabura understood he had been replaced with Bu, someone he wasn't even sure can really protect Babadai. How pitiful. First Yakin, then him. Babadai had sacrificed his own men one after the other, all because he was terrified that Raditz would come for him, after sensing the stolen egg. Guess he won't be able to see Bu fight against that monster king. Truly, a pity. Thud. Dabura's body fell to the ground, lifeless, and Babadai smiling picked up the lamp-like device, which showed full. I did it dash. Swish. In the very next second, a whole bunch of people showed up in his cave, with Kibito being at the forefront, causing Babadai's eyes to pop. Earthlings? Please forgive me? Let me see your king. I will definitely give him a satisfactory answer. Babadai immediately knelt down and started begging, which had everyone present to be taken aback. Why was Babadai so deadly afraid of Raditz out of nowhere? What were they missing? Chapter 133 The Egg. Raditz and Babadai, both parties were unaware that the other one was afraid of themselves. Raditz didn't know the reason why Babadai fled Earth was him, nor did Babadai know what Bu's actual abilities were and how wary Raditz was of the creature. This gap in information created a big misunderstanding. Both parties thought that the other side was incredibly deadly. And this misunderstanding was what caused the following events to go down. I didn't want to take away Bu's egg without telling your king. I was just borrowing it. Just borrowing it? I swear. Watching Babadai grovel before them had the Z-fighters go through a variety of emotions. The most intense of them was speechlessness. Is this the big bad threat Supreme Kai was so worried about? The guy was practically begging for forgiveness after the slightest hint of threat came his way. Pathetic. Is this your big bad wizard? This is what you collected us all for? Vegeta scowled, and violently slapped Kibito out of his way. Boom. Ignoring Kibito who had crashed to the side, Vegeta walked up to Babadai and looked down at him with disgust. Babadai looked up fearfully and internally relaxed after seeing it wasn't Raditz. Adjusting his emotions, he began again to plead. Please, let me see your king, I can definitely make it up to him. Vegeta twitched his lips and gave a smirk to Babadai. Pitiful, utterly pitiful, this is what Supreme Kai was afraid of, don't make me laugh. Vegeta looked at Kibito and barked in anger, this was a complete waste of his time, and Kibito clenched his fist and looked down in shame. What was he supposed to say? This wasn't what he had in mind. Babadai didn't behave as such when he was clashing against them all these years. Humph. Vegeta snorted watching Kibito look down in nothing but shame. All this while he was purposely giving his back to Babadai, to see if he was going to attack. But even when all of them were talking, this guy didn't even have the guts to move from his place. He was kneeling in that position, motionless. This enraged Vegeta even more. This trash, you are a waste of my time, perish. Creating a ki blast, Vegeta aimed it at Babadai. He was prideful, but he did keep Raditz's words in mind. The order of killing Babadai and Dabura before they can revive Bu was taken seriously by him. So although he was clearly disappointed at the threat being nothing more than that, he faithfully carried out the order nonetheless. TCH. Clicking his tongue because Babadai even now didn't move from his place and only trembled, Vegeta just decided to end this. But before he could do that, Goku spoke out. Hey Kibito, he has given up fighting, can't we let him go? Goku didn't like taking life for no reason, especially life of someone who clearly wasn't even defending himself. So he put forward his opinion on the matter, but both Kibito and Vegeta were against it. Shut up Kakarot, he is going to just turn around and do it again when we leave. I am afraid I have to agree, Babadai is an evil wizard, there is no saving him. Goku scratched the back of his head in a distressed fashion, he was a bit troubled on what should be done. But then Gohan spoke up, having spent the last 7 years in peace, his sense of battle has also waned considerably. So although he was stronger, he was much more peaceful compared to his Cell Saga self. But he has given up everyone, see, he isn't even defending himself anymore. Gohan, who was now bigger than his father in size, made his way towards Babadai after saying this. He wanted to prove that Babadai won't do anything, and even if he did, Gohan knew he was stronger than him, so he went ahead fearlessly. Hey MR, get up. Gohan bent down, trying to pick Babadai up from the ground. And then it happened. Swish. Gohan's eyes shrunk, so did every Z fighters, because Gohan's outstretched hand just went through Babadai like a mirage. Kibito, who had fallen down on the ground, instantly felt as if he was sitting on a hot pan. No, that's an illusion. Babadai isn't here. Piccolo immediately rushed towards Gohan and kicked the illusion in his face. Pop. Causing it to pop out of existence. It was then that the Z fighters could see it, the ongoing reality behind the illusion. Ha ha ha, you are too late Earthlings. I have done it. Bu is about to be born. There was the real Babadai, cackling like a madman while hiding behind the egg, holding the energy kettle in his hands as he pumped all of its contents into Bu's enclosure. The Z fighters were aghast, so they were talking to an illusion all this while? They were played like buffons and they didn't even realize it. Babadai, you were hiding there this whole time? Goku asked in an amazed yet serious way. He thought for sure Babadai was asking for mercy before. This was the very first time he had fought against a legitimate sorcerer. He had no idea how dangerous a Magi-Can's methods actually were. So he together with his entire group got tricked by Babadai in an almost childlike fashion. Fools! The moment I saw that Monster King hadn't come with you, I knew I had a chance. And you idiots made it so easy? I was on guard against this Kai the whole time, but thanks to you getting him out of the way, he couldn't even sense what was going on. Kibito was ashen, he really was about to sense if something was off to be sure, but he was slapped away by Vegeta before he could do anything about it. After that he was distracted because he was ashamed of his failure, and just like that he had wasted the precious opportunity Supreme Kai had brought for them. Ahahaha, Bu, come out and kill everyone for me. Babadai loudly laughed while raising his hands, and an ominous ki soon began emanating from the cocoon. Piccolo and Gohan, who were the closest to the egg, jumped back almost immediately, so did Vegeta and Kibito. The entire Z cast was on guard as the egg had begun to shake, as if something was about to come out of it. This energy. It's so dark. Piccolo was sweating bullets. Meanwhile the human Z fighters had begun to feel the gap between them and the top class again. Only the Saiyans and Krillin were still ready to fight, the Saiyans being the warrior race they were, and Krillin being the absolute powerhouse he had grown to be. Wiggle. The egg began shaking more and more as time went by, and after some more time of fearful waiting, crack. The egg cracked open, reveling inside of it. It's empty, exclaimed the Z fighters and Babadai at the same time. But both of the group's emotions were different. The Z fighters were relieved and Babadai was panicked. He had already offended everyone here. If Bu isn't in this egg, he was a goner. Chapter 134 Bu SHSSSSS. Very light sounds similar to that of air escaping a soda bottle came from the egg. But still, no sight of Majin Bu was found. Bu. It can't be. He should have been here. Babadai, who was the most affected by this accident, fell down on the ground. He was in despair. Eei. But feeling some dangerous signals coming from his side, he mechanically turned his head towards the problematic direction. Smirk. And saw Vegeta smiling and pointing his ki ball at him once more. Deadly afraid of the attack, Babadai quickly raised his hand and created a yellow ball-like shield, trapping him inside the ball. Oh, a shield, not gonna try to trick us now. Vegeta almost laughed watching his prey become cornered like that. Babadai had played him like a fool before, how dare he? Whoosh. Without another word, Vegeta took action, and the energy sphere rushed towards the screaming Babadai. Boom. Hitting him square in the face, breaking apart the magical barrier through sheer force. Rumble asterisk. But its influence wasn't limited to Babadai, the remaining energy hit the cave walls, shaking its 1,000-year-old foundations. The place is about to collapse, hurry and get out of here. Tien exclaimed. His 3 eyes gave him a far better vision than most, so he found the rocks becoming looser much quicker than others. Vegeta, couldn't you have gone a little easier? See what you did. Goku complained while jumping out of the crumbling cave, and Vegeta just snorted in response. He had used too much power because he was pissed at getting played like a buffon a while ago. While everyone was jumping away, Gohan went out of his way to carry Kibito. Thanks. Who gave a curt nod and a small smile. He had been slapped away by Vegeta abruptly and didn't have the time to defend himself, so he was hurt and not as quick on his feet. Of course, he could have gotten out by himself too, but it would not have been without a little trouble. So Gohan's sentiment was much appreciated by him, as opposed to say Vegeta, who Kibito was now going to watch daily and curse. From his planet that is, he didn't have the guts to that on his face. Rumble. With everyone out of the cave, it collapsed into itself pretty quickly, burying Babadai's body and Bu's eggshell with it. They had won, but Piccolo was a previous Kami and a really old one at that. He had a good deal of decision-making ability, something he himself thought of as prudence. So he had an issue with the rough handling of the spot, and who better to ask about his worries than the assistant of the Supreme Kai? Is this alright? The blast destroyed the egg that was supposed to hold Majin Buu. If Buu isn't in it, he could have been released elsewhere. Isn't that egg the sole way he could be trapped? This last piece of information was something Piccolo had gotten while speaking with the Supreme Kai, so he was a bit hesitant at the loss of a sealing container. Kibito, who was also aware of this information, had a stagnant look on his face, but then spoke in an unsure way. It shouldn't be a problem. That egg is something Babadai came up with. Only Babadai and him can use their magic to hold Buu in it. We cannot use it even if we get it, so it should be fine. Kibito was getting unsure the more he spoke, but hell, he had to maintain his pride as a god somehow. What was he to say? Good question, human. I don't know. That would make him sound so silly. But I don't think Buu has been released before this. We were taking precautions since a long time ago. Buu should have been inside that shell. I am not sure what happened. Kibito added another point, and this point was something he was sure of. Chitsu rubbed his chin and offered an explanation. Maybe he died inside. You said he wasn't released since a long time, right? So he could have starved. Kibito again was unsure if this could have happened. After all, from what he was told by Supreme Kai, Buu was an immortal monster. But could immortal truly be immortal? Kibito didn't think so. Maybe. That's probably it. He accepted this theory. What else could have been the reason for Bu's absence? Nappa, who had been listening in all this while, smiled and quipped in a sarcastic tone. Some waste of time this has been. You were cautious of a guy who died ages ago. Ha. Kibito could only gain an embarrassed look on his face. He had made a total fool of himself. And these guys didn't leave a single chance to remind himself of that. Let's hurry back. I will tell Supreme Kai-sama about this. Before that, I will drop you people back on Earth. Grab onto me. But Goku saw through Kibito's desire to escape embarrassment, so he smiled and eased the mood. I can bring everyone back. You can return to Supreme Kai first if it's urgent. Kibito was startled but gratefully accepted Goku's help. Thank you. Safe journey. Swish. And then Kibito vanished with Kai. Goku also didn't think there was any fun to had in this barren planet, so giving a signal to his buddies, he prepared for instant transmission. Yamcha shrugged his shoulders and grabbed onto Goku while complaining. Man, I thought I could have had fun after such a long time. Talk about a bummer. Giving a mutual feelings laugh to Yamcha, Goku had everyone grab onto him and teleported out without delay. He wanted to get back and train some more. He had to close the gap between Raditz and him somehow. Fun. What nobody found out until leaving was that a pink figure was sitting underneath the rubble. The fat pink figure's eyes were focused on the spot the Z-fighters had been a moment ago. Remembering Yamcha and his words before leaving, Bu became stagnant for a second, then abruptly grinned. Fun. Bu likes having fun. Ah! Screaming out in a eerie fashion, Bu's surroundings lit up in a pink hue. Boom! And a large blast evaporated the rubble he was trapped in. Not looking the least bit winded or bothered by his actions, Bu turned his head towards a place in the sky. His eyes seemed to be looking at something invisible to the naked eye, or was it in fact visible to Bu? Only Bai knew the answer. The only thing that can be confirmed if someone was to look, was if one went straight towards that particular direction, they would encounter a planet named Earth. But nobody was there to confirm it, only Bu, who was a bit lost and confused. What now? He scratched his forehead while thinking out loud, then tilted his head and puffed out his chubby cheeks. Bu want fun? Bu declared, and then did something which would make Raditz clench his teeth in frustration. He put two of his fingers on his forehead and concentrated. Bu. He was concentrating, ever so hard on a particular key, the key which had told him there was fun to had. The key, which belonged to Yamcha. Chapter 135 Z-Sword. After unknowingly unleashing the natural god of destruction from his enclosure, the Z-Fighters left planet Wasabi in a hurry, blissfully unaware of the terrible events about to go down. Meanwhile in the land of Kais, Raditz was standing with the Supreme Kai, looking at a gorgeous sword inserted into a rock formation up above. That is the Z-Sword. Raditz whistled admiringly. This was a well-made sword for sure, that was to be expected as well. An angel had manufactured said sword. This wasn't any run-of-the-mill artifact but a true divine creation. Beautiful, isn't it? Supreme Kai, who was wholly unaware of how his ancestor was sealed in the sword, or how this was made by Beerus and Whis to punish the Kai, was proudly showing off the trinket. This is the Z-Sword. Word has been passed down to us that the Z-Sword can make its user the strongest being in existence. With this, we can surely defeat Bu once and for all. Twitching his lips, Raditz contemplated how much old Kai exaggerated his powers, for such rumors to go around. The strongest in the universe? Whis, Beerus, Meruz, Broly, Monica, any one of them can clap whatever champion old Kai can create. Or maybe I am not giving him enough credit. Ultimate Gohan was the strongest mortal in known existence at that time. Except gods, only a monster like Broly could top Gohan, so it might not be all hot air on his part. Watching Raditz contemplate silently, Supreme Kai was a bit flustered. It wasn't that he didn't have the patience to let Raditz think, it was that they were running out of time. Raditz? Can we get started? We still need to complete your sword training before Bu is revived. Yes, sorry for the delay, I got a bit distracted. Looking at the Z-Sword with renewed vigor, Raditz decided to pull it out. He didn't have much to go on in terms of defeating Bu except beat him till he can't get up anymore, but that was a very risky thing to do. Nobody knows when Bu would create a new technique out of frustration to escape his plight. Bu just screamed and found a way to escape the time chamber without even knowing what he did. Anything he doesn't like, he can just make something up on the spot to counter that. Not to mention the titanic amounts of God Ki lying dormant within Bu, his energy reserves were so enormous that it overpowered a full power Moro and gave Goku complete Ultra Instinct Susanoo, all in one go. So Raditz can only sit back and relax when Bu's evil half is dead for good, or he is sealed inside something. Something like the Z-Sword. Cracking his knuckles, Raditz stared at the Z-Sword in a focused way. Maybe he can get the method to make this sealing sword out of old Kai's mouth. It didn't hurt to try. Do I just pull it out? Or something else is needed first? Supreme Kai shook his head. As far as he knew, there was no other condition than the ability to pull out the sword. No, pulling out the sword is sufficient, that is the test. Nodding his head to show his understanding, Raditz jumped on top of the rock formation and gripped the sword without any more questions. Let's try base form first. Getting into the correct posture for pulling something out, Raditz's veins popped and he started to put his back into the task. Soon winds had begun to blow and the ground had started to shake from Raditz's efforts, but even though nature was churning from his power, the Z-Sword did not move. Putting all of his base strength into the task, Raditz yelled with power. His muscles bulged from the sheer force he was putting into the task. Ugh. But again, the sword did not move even an inch from its position. And Supreme Kai was more than a little flustered at this point. Can't you pull it out? Try again, maybe this time it has loosened a bit. But contrary to Supreme Kai's words, Raditz let the sword go and stood up straight. Crack. Cracking his back, he smiled while looking at the sword. Nah, I can't pull it out. Not as I am right now at least. The first line had Supreme Kai almost get a heart attack, but the second line rekindled the hope inside of him. Not letting the Supreme Kai down, Raditz got into his power-up stance. Let's try with Super Saiyan this time. Whoosh. But he got interrupted by the sudden appearance of Kibito, who had teleported to the planet via Kai just now. Kibito, why are you here? What about Majin Buu? Supreme Kai asked in a surprised tone, but Kibito, who was about to complain about the Z-Fighters' antics, quickly swallowed his words after realizing Raditz was also here. Giving a smile which looked quite ugly on his serious face, Kibito told his superior what he had just seen. Supreme Kai-sama, we tried to stop Majin Buu's revival, but Babadai tricked us and managed to open the seal. Before Supreme Kai could start panicking again, Kibito spoke once more. Although it was for naught, the seal which held Bu was empty, nobody was inside the shell. It is very likely that these long years had managed to turn Bu into dust. Bu is no more, he has perished. Shin was wide-eyed, he was so shocked that he froze in his place for a good minute. But nobody said anything about this, because Kibito was busy being happy about a job well done, and Raditz? He was busy gritting his teeth in anger. He knew Bu could be revived, it was possible for an accident to happen, but still, this was too soon. One job, I gave them one job. For what reason did they let a weakling like Babadai succeed like that? Damn it. Now what do? We lost our best chance against him. These fools, absolute fools. Raditz was frustrated, but he knew it in his heart that something must have gone wrong. His men were given explicit instructions to not let Babadai succeed in breaking the egg or suck energy out of them. But not only did Babadai get Super Saiyan 2 equivalent energy from somewhere, he also fed all that energy to Bu right before their eyes. This was such a massive blunder that Raditz was amazed at how his men managed to pull this off. But he wasn't one to jump to conclusions. He will find out why this happened after he meets them. For now, he had much more pressing matters to attend to. Oh man, I gotta seriously think of what to do now, can't let Majin Buu run around, God knows where he will run off to and who he will absorb. This time around Buu was revived on a different planet, a planet which was barren, so Raditz wasn't sure where his next destination could be at. At least one thing the Z-Fighters did right, they left Buu in that planet unknowingly. He can rest assured that Buu won't attack Earth anytime soon, after all they couldn't possibly mess up so badly as to give Buu directions to Earth and a reason to follow them on top of that. That would be absurd. Chapter 136 A New God Huff. After a while Raditz's clenched fist loosened as he got his bearings back, and right around that time Supreme Kai also recovered from his shock. Buu is dead. Wiping away one stray tear from the corner of his eyes, Supreme Kai smiled at Kibito and praised him with all his heart. Wonderful news, Kibito? Truly wonderful? Finally, we won't have to worry about Buu running amok anymore. Supreme Kai also turned towards Raditz, and then gratefully bowed to him. Thank you very much for your support during this time, Raditz, even knowing the possible danger you didn't back down. Although Buu is now dead, but I would still like you to continue your stay here. You have helped us a lot, so please stay for as long as you like, and train to your heart's content. You have earned it. Ignoring Kibito's twitching eyes, Shin smiled and extended his formal invitation to Raditz, via raising his hand and pointing his palm towards him. Ha! Raditz was taken aback when he heard Shin's yell and saw his royal armor glow and disappear into a burst of energy, as a new outfit was given to him. This is... Touching the yellow Potara earrings on his ear, and the full-sleeved Kai clothes he had been given, Raditz's eyes widened. Did he give me the Supreme Kai's attended position? So I am the same as Trunks and Gohan were in the original. This was such a surprise that for a second Raditz even ignored the fact that Buu was actually revived and nobody knew. Because these clothes were extremely important when given by a Supreme Kai, when Shin did this, what he essentially did was to promote Raditz to the same level as Kibito and Zamasu. This wasn't just a name, it was a godly position. He was now a god of creation in training, just like Trunks and Gohan had unknowingly become in the original. But unlike those two, I know what godly powers come along with such a position. Kai, healing, forced teleportation, creation, authority only below the Supreme Kai. And best of all, as an assistant my life isn't connected with Beerus, both Shin and Beerus can die, and I will still keep my powers and life. This was how Trunks kept his ability to heal and his position as assistant Kai, even when the Kai-Hakai duo of his timeline were dead. This is great, it is far beyond what I could have asked for, I have become a god. But my key doesn't feel any different, is it a time thing or do I have to train with Shin before I unlock it? Raditz wondered. Shin was dead in Trunks' timeline and Gohan gave up his position almost immediately in favor of wearing his dad's clothes, so none of the two actually got to the part where Shin could train them. But now Raditz had a chance. As long as he protects Shin, he can get in touch with God Ki much sooner. Thank you, I am grateful for this chance, Supreme Kai-sama. Bowing his head to Shin, Raditz gave him the respect he deserved. He wasn't so pedantic as to not do something so mundane because of his pride. Shin was not strong, just around a full power Super Saiyan strength, but his will was not weak. To make such a decision so easily required a strong will, and Raditz respected that. So if nothing else, just for this alone, he would try to save the god from the upcoming chaos. But their time was running out, so straightening from his bow, Raditz gazed at Kibito, much to the latter's uneasiness. Although all that was swept under the rug when Raditz asked his question. Kibito, you just said there was nothing inside the shell, correct? Did you check the place well? As far as I understand, Bibidai, Babadai, Buu, the trio can all use magic. Is it possible Babadai made Buu invisible? The sudden tremor that went through the Kai duo's spine didn't matter to Raditz, as he tried to find a way to tell them that Buu was there and definitely wasn't dead. I only ask because Babadai succeeded in opening the egg. From what I know, it only opens when Buu has absorbed enough energy. If he was dead, then what exactly was absorbing all that energy? Kibito and Shin almost jumped like a cat whose tail was stepped on. Gulping hard, Shin trembled but laughed in an attempt to ignore the fear creeping up on him. No way, Buu is probably dead. Kibito couldn't have been there and missed him, right? There is no way. I did check, but the cave collapsed and Kibito wasn't able to say that he wanted to leave right away because Nappa and Vegeta were making fun of him, so he just kept stuttering, and this made Supreme Kai realize they might be in very deep shit. Kibito, check it out at once. Shin was tragically afraid for the universe now, but keeping his position in mind he attempted to guide Kibito the best he could. Alright. Kibito didn't dilly-dally either and quickly sat down while creating a glass ball, while both Supreme Kai and Raditz landed besides him to observe what was happening. With a light hum, the glass ball began to show a hazy image which quickly became clear. They are fine, at least they didn't meet Buu after I left. Kibito first checked on the Z-Fighters. He had left when they were back at Wasabi, so he figured if Buu was alive they would have fought by now. Supreme Kai-sama, it seems they are back at Earth. They must have left Wasabi soon after me. Shin nodded his head with visible relief. Looks like they haven't met Buu yet. But just this one check wasn't enough for them. They had made a mistake once. They really didn't want to make it again. I'll check the ruins that buried Babadai and the sealed egg, Kibito said while he ran his hands before the glass ball. The picture changed once more, but this time around all color drained from their faces. Because what should have been a collapsed cave according to Kibito, was now a dirt plain, and what should have been devoid of life, had a pink humanoid standing in the ruins. That is Majin Buu. Shin backed away in terror and fell on his butt. There he was, the terrifying Buu. What is he doing? Asked Kibito, who was also scared out of his wits. He made a massive blunder. That guy, he is trying to initiate instant transmission. Kakarot, how did he manage to teach Buu instant transmission before even meeting him? Raditz wasn't even in the mood to be speechless anymore, he was just plain confused. If Gaku had met Buu, he wouldn't be back at Earth right now, yet Buu somehow knew instant transmission. How did this happen? It might be because they left Wasabi by using that technique. Kibito said his guess, which made Raditz look at him in a confused way. You didn't bring them back. Kibito was once more tongue-tied. He just wanted to get out of there and not face Vegeta, so when Gaku gave him the chance to leave he took it. I was told to come here and alert the Supreme Kai of the news. I am sorry. Kibito bowed to Shin. He understood he had made a blunder in his hurry. He should have been more forgiving and not as condescending on the fact that they were mortals. If he could have let go of his prejudices, he might not have made the same blunders. Alas, what is done is done. Supreme Kai shook his head. Now we must hurry. Kibito, tell the Earthlings Buu is revived. Knowing Buu's nature, he might as well follow them to Earth. Wasabi is barren, it won't keep him entertained for long. Kibito quickly got up and after a bow, vanished using Kai. Now only Raditz and Shin remained, but this time around, the problem wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was a fact. It was time to pull out the Z-sword. Chapter 137 Tea Party. When the universe was slowly crawling towards its destruction, unaware of it all, Bulma was sitting in her garden with Raditz Jr., her son. But Prince Raditz wasn't being as energetic as usual. No, he wasn't sad or anything, it was because he had his siblings and friends with him right now. While playing with Bardock, Trunks, and Goten, Raditz Jr. showed remarkable control over his emotions. This boy, always trying to show he is in control like his father, he learns the worst traits from Raditz. Bulma patted her forehead and complained to the girls sitting beside him. She was spending this day with her friends. Launch, Pai, Ranfan, Violet, Tights and 18 were all at Capsule Corporation right now, as their children were begging to play at Bulma's. He has a lot to live up to, and you got off lucky. At least he isn't as uptight as my daughter. She inherited no grace from me at all. Ranfan complained while watching the second group of children mingling amongst each other. This group had her daughter Fasha, 18's daughter Lazuli, Tight's daughter Marin and Pai's daughter Jin. Here the leader of the group was Fasha. She had inherited the characteristics of a Xin perfectly. Although she was always trying to show her strength to Raditz Jr., her mother knew the girl simply wanted to be recognized by him. She has a little something of me in there after all. This pleased her mother. She was a vain person by choice, because that was how the world worked according to her experience. So her daughter wanting to impress Raditz Jr., even if as a friend wanting to be recognized, is something she approved of. Although she would never say it out loud, these girls around her didn't understand her worldview at all, they were all naive. Ho ho ho. Ignoring the suddenly laughing Ranfan, the girls happily talked amongst each other. They knew Ranfan must be thinking something shifty again, so they simply ignored the lady. When the chatter was ongoing and many of the girls who didn't like each other stabbed the other side with their subtle words, Tights had a whole another motive going on. Hey, do you guys know what happened to everyone? Krillin hasn't come back yet. She questioned with worry on her face. Her husband had left with the group today morning and hasn't come back yet. This was why they had agreed to gather everyone today in the end. Their husbands were doing a group activity, why shouldn't they? But they were taking a lot of time, so Tights was a bit worried. They should be fine, Raditz would have told me if something was up. 18 said casually while drinking lemonade. She had only drunk a little bit of the liquid when suddenly, swish, the whole group of guys appeared in the yard, causing 18 to choke out of surprise. Cough 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 ***. Coughing while stabilized herself, she found that the group of girls who were just talking and laughing with her, left her alone almost immediately. TCH. 18 clicked her tongue. She hated such parties. This wasn't her type of fun time, but well, everyone has to compromise with something or the other in life. This was her compromise. She then started to search for Raditz in the group, but curiously she couldn't find him. But before she could question them about him, someone else did. Where is Raditz? Asked Pai. Gaku, who was asked the question, smiled, and was about to answer before Launch said something in a surprised tone. Hey, why do I sense Raditz in the other world? His position just shifted. Her confusion was evident on her cute face, but this wasn't a time to think about her cute face, because not even the Z-fighters knew how this could have happened. He just left with the Supreme Kai. What in world could have happened? What? Did he just get himself killed? Bulma screamed with fear and anger evident on her face. 18 once again choked on her lemonade and Pai's tail slapped the ground in nervousness. But Launch, the ever-cheerful girl, wasn't the least bit worried. She was the manager of Otherworld. Life and death were already blurry at best for her. So what if he died? She could just meet him in heaven, no big deal. But she wasn't a heartless person. Bulma and the others couldn't do the same as her, so she tried to find out what just happened. Let me check. I don't know, now that I think about it, his status is present in both Otherworld and the world of living. How odd. Laughing merrily as if she just found out about something cool, she kept looking, disregarding any frustration building up in the others. I think I got it. He's like me. I also have an imprint of other world and living world. This can happen if he is recognized as a manager of some sort by the world. Maybe he became a god. Hehe. Bulma was looking at Launch with indignation and asked, so is he okay or not? And how did he become a god all of a sudden? What the hell? Swish. Raditz is alright, answered a gruff voice in Launch's stead. The voice came from Kibito, who had just arrived via Kai. Oh, it's you. Then do you know what happened to Raditz? Pai asked the tall red man. She had seen him before when the duo had come for their group. He called himself a Kai, Supreme Kai if she remembers it right. Aren't they supposed to be the highest gods or something? I do know what happened to him, and it is as you think, manager of the other world. He has become a god, a Supreme Kai in training. This is the second highest rank of god in the universe, going by his strength and sense of honor. I would say it won't be long before he is promoted to the highest status of Supreme Kai. Launch simply clapped her hands with giddiness after the news, while Bulma frowned. Pai looked confused, and 18 was wondering how did he manage to become a god all of a sudden. She wouldn't mind giving it a try as well. Goddess 18, that had a nice ring to it. I don't care if he is a god or not. When is he coming back home? Bulma questioned angrily. He had promised to spend time with her tonight. They had plans. How can he just ditch her like that? Kibito was taken aback by the outright uncaring attitude of Raditz's wife. She was immortal. How did she have to guts to ignore gods was something Kibito didn't know. Neither did he want to know. Because he had come here not to talk about his new work buddy, but to warn them. I am not aware of when he can come home, but I would presume it isn't anytime soon. Before Bulma can burst her anger on him, Kibito switched his words. Raditz can't come because he is training for Majin Buu. Gasp. Yes, that's right. Majin Buu wasn't dead. He simply hadn't appeared before the cave collapsed. Taking in the abrupt serious expressions of the Z gang, Kibito continued. And Son Goku, he seems to have copied your instant transmission. Buu is preparing to come to Earth, and he might be here any minute. I would suggest leaving for a better battlefield. If Buu arrives right now, none of us can survive. A ripple of shock spread throughout the group. So their plan failed after all? And Buu was about to arrive any minute now? This wasn't good. Chapter 138 Training Sword. Raditz was observing his planet from the Supreme Kai's realm and soon breathed a sigh of relief. After the Z fighters left for a more suitable battlefield, he felt much more relaxed. It seems Kibito is in time. Supreme Kai relaxed as well and wiped off his sweat. It would have been disastrous if Buu had caught them off guard. Shin never observed the universe in search for strength, so he didn't know any other people aside from the Z fighters who could help him defeat Buu. This coupled with his chosen champion being from said planet, he would rather Buu not slaughter his family before his very eyes. What can he say? It's a very demotivating thing after all. It's good they made it out of there. I won't have to worry about Capsule Corporation going up in flames. All of our new generation is there. Walking away from the crystal ball, Raditz flew towards the sword once more while mumbling lightly. It would be a shame if our younger generation needs to fight when we are still alive. If need arises, I will take Buu on all by myself. The Supreme Kai sitting down below had a smile appear on his face. It wasn't only Piccolo whose big ears had better hearing, it was the same for Supreme Kai. Hearing his champion ready to take on the threat one-on-one gave him confidence in his choice. Not many would go through the trouble, especially if one was already a Supreme Kai assistant. They technically shouldn't bother with threats like Buu. But Shin was too soft-hearted and frankly too afraid of Buu to simply let it go. Raditz, Buu seems to have latched onto one of your weaker warriors' key. That's why he taking a long time to locate him. But we never know, he could have remembered someone else's key as well. If he gets bored he might teleport to them first. Flying up the rock formation and landing beside Raditz, Shin encouraged his champion. We must make haste. Raditz seemed serious although he didn't respond in agreement. Still, without wasting time he bent down in a power-up stance. Stay back. After warning the Supreme Kai, Raditz clenched his fist and began exhaling. H-A-A-A-ah. Whoosh. A yellow aura burst out of Raditz as his eyes rolled to the back of his head. His hair turned a shining yellow and his power multiplied by a full 500 times. Incredible. Shin braced himself from the energy storm hitting his face. The sheer power would have pushed him back if Raditz didn't give him a warning. Loosening his fist, Raditz himself crouched down and held onto the Z-sword. Sheeing. Almost as soon as he put a little effort into it, the Z-sword began moving upwards. Supreme Kai was thrilled. There it is, the Z-sword had begun to move. Amazing? You did it, Raditz. Wait, why did you stop? Go on, pull it out, I am sure you can do it. Supreme Kai encouraged Raditz, who seems to have stopped pulling the sword out after the halfway point. But Raditz didn't move. After encountering this sword he had his own set of plans. Shin's words alone weren't enough to make him change his mind. You are too worried, Supreme Kai-sama. Buu is already free. Me taking a few extra minutes now won't change anything. I would only lose out on getting a gauge on my strength this way. Woo. Powering down from his Super Saiyan state, Raditz once more crouched down. This sword is made heavy on purpose. It's exceptionally heavy, and it is just in the right position for me to test my strength. Whoever made this was a master. It would be a shame if I didn't attempt this with everything I have. After trying to pick up the sword, Raditz understood what Whis' intention might have been. This was the same type of training Whis liked to provide with his full body coverage weighted gear. Putting so much weight on a sword is equivalent to forcing the person using it to train their entire body. After all, wielding a sword isn't about randomly swinging it around. The art had its own set of katas, some of them needed specific sets of muscles to perform. Although it's something which would need time to bear fruit, and that isn't the kind of thing I can rely on right now. So Raditz thought of a compromise. At least he would try to see how each of his transformations are in comparison to each other. Not only ki-wise, but overall effectiveness. Still, leaving the Supreme Kai hanging wasn't all that good, so Raditz described to him in the simplest possible way how his transformations worked. Supreme Kai, this is something I call a carry. It is based on a Xun's inherent Uzuru abilities. Take a look. Growling. Supreme Kai watched with attention as Raditz's aura increased exponentially every second. That's amazing. This is far beyond an additive or multiplicative increase. These boosts aren't possible without an exponential growth. Supreme Kai was stunned. He was beginning to understand why Raditz might be showing him his transformations. Beyond the desire to test himself, there was likely a show of strength. Raditz wanted to show him his strength, both to support him in this crucial time, and to give him peace of mind. You might be right, I have been far too hasty. What has happened already. What I need to do now is train you to the best of my abilities, instead of rushing you as fast as possible. This would only result in mistakes that could have been avoided. While Supreme Kai watched Raditz's power up with wonder and slowly realized that Raditz had a better sense of training directions than he did, Raditz had already powered up to the maximum he could. Huff, this should be enough. Now let's give it a go. Grabbing onto the sword with one hand this time around, Raditz pulled. Shing. As if the stone was made of butter, the sword was pulled out a third of the distance with exceptional ease, before once more Raditz stopped. Wonderful. This state of yours, it is stronger than your previous Super Xun state. Supreme Kai exclaimed after seeing the ease at which Raditz had accomplished the task. Raditz smiled, but once more, he powered down. Huff. I have a good idea on where I stand now. Alright, this is the last transformation. Although calling it a technique is more correct. This time around Supreme Kai didn't rush. He wanted to watch Raditz's last transformation and was prepared to deal with another burst of raw energy. But what came next made him hang his mouth in shock. No aura burst out of Raditz, no ground-shaking events happened. The only thing that changed was his hair and his presence. White hair and grey eyes. This seems familiar. Shin murmured. If he wasn't sensing mortal ki from Raditz, he would have thought a fellow god was standing beside him. Currently Shin had no idea what Ultra Instinct was. He had never completed his training before everyone was massacred, yet he could feel this form resembled a god. He couldn't wait to see how this silent transformation would perform against the Z-sword. Clutch. And Raditz gave him his wish, hooking the sword handle with his pinky finger. He gave it a tug. Shii. And the entire sword was lifted up. It was as if there wasn't even the least bit resistance, not even butter-like. It was totally resistance-free. Gulp. Shin gulped. Raditz had now lifted the sword and was playing with it freely, swinging it around faster than he could even see. He should have been happy, but he couldn't help but wonder, can this sword really help Raditz against Bu? He was already strong enough to breeze through this, but it was obvious his champion didn't have the confidence to face Bu yet. Could it be that Raditz is strong enough to defeat Bu already, yet is too wary of the foe because of his words? Shin couldn't help but think like this, because if this wasn't the case and Raditz was still wary for a good reason, then wouldn't that mean he had nothing in his hands which could help against Bu? That wasn't a thought he liked to entertain, so Shin was stuck in his place, confused about what the future might hold.